The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and fate. But what happens when a warrior from beyond the stars arrives, carrying with him the disciplines of a forgotten world and a code of honor that predates the Republic itself? In a galaxy where samurai never existed, one man would prove that the way of the warrior transcends time, space, and even the Force itself. Jin Sakai knelt in the sacred grove on Tsushima's highest peak, the same place where his father had taught him to meditate as a child. Incense smoke curled upward through shafts of moonlight, and the ancient stones hummed with the prayers of generations. He had come seeking clarity after everything, after becoming the ghost, after breaking every code he'd been raised to uphold, after saving his island by abandoning his honor. The weight of his choices pressed down like armor, too heavy to bear. "Ancestors," he whispered, "show me if the path I walk leads to redemption or damnation." The wind died. The forest fell silent. Then the stones beneath him blazed with light that had no color he could name, and the air split open like silk under a blade. Jin tried to rise, to draw his katana, but the pull was irresistible, a current that seized not his body but something deeper. His last thought before the world dissolved was of his uncle's voice. "You are no longer samurai." Then there was only light and the sensation of falling through an infinite distance. Jin struck solid ground hard enough to drive the breath from his lungs. Pain lanced through his shoulder, but training overrode shock. He rolled, came up in a defensive crouch, hand on his katana's grip. His armor had absorbed most of the impact, but his head rang like a temple bell. Slowly, vision cleared. He was not on Tsushima. The sky above was wrong. Too vast, scattered with stars he'd never seen, and split by a jagged green band of light that pulsed like a living thing. The air tasted of metal and chemicals, nothing like the clean mountain wind of home. Beneath his feet was not earth, but some kind of dark stone, smooth and artificial, stretching in geometric patterns toward structures that pierced the sky like iron mountains. Jin forced himself to breathe, to center his mind as his father had taught. Assess, adapt, act. The structures around him were buildings, he realized, but nothing like any architecture he knew. They rose in impossible towers of metal and glass, connected by bridges that hung without support. Lights moved through the air, vehicles of some kind, floating without horses or wheels. In the distance, he heard sounds that might have been voices, distorted by the strange acoustics of this alien place. A whining noise made him spin. 3 figures emerged from between buildings, clad in white armor that covered them completely, face-concealing helmets marked with black eye lenses. They carried weapons unlike any Jin had seen, sleek tubes that they pointed with trained precision. "Halt!" one shouted, voice mechanically distorted. "Identify yourself!" Jin's hand remained on his katana. The figures moved like soldiers, disciplined and coordinated. But their armor, their weapons, the very strangeness of them, nothing made sense. He had been transported to some realm beyond understanding, perhaps a punishment from the ancestors themselves. "I am Jin Sakai," he said carefully, "of Clan Sakai, protector of Tsushima. I do not know this place." The lead soldier, if that's what it was, gestured sharply. "Drop your weapon. You're in violation of Imperial curfew in Sector 7. Imperial. The word sent ice through Jin's veins. An empire. Another occupation force. The Mongols had come to Tsushima claiming dominion, demanding submission. These soldiers had the same tone, the same assumption of authority over people who had not invited them. "I will not surrender my blade," Jin said quietly. "It belonged to my father and his father before him." The soldiers raised their weapons. Energy hummed, a high-pitched whine that set Jin's teeth on edge. Red light gathered at the barrel tips. Then they fired. Jin moved on pure instinct, decades of training compressing into a single fluid motion. He drew his katana as he sidestepped, the blade singing free of its sheath. Bolts of crimson energy streaked past where he'd stood. Not arrows, not bullets, but something that crackled like lightning and scorched the stone where they struck. The soldiers adjusted aim with mechanical efficiency, but Jin was already inside their range, moving between them like wind through bamboo. His katana caught the second soldier's weapon arm, the ancestral steel biting through white armor with a shriek of metal on metal. The soldier cried out. Human, Jin noted, and stumbled back. The third soldier swung his weapon like a club. Jin ducked under it, swept the man's legs, and rose with his blade at the fallen soldier's throat. Enough, he commanded. The remaining soldier froze, weapon trained on Jin but finger hesitant on the trigger. Through the helmet's lenses, Jin sensed fear. Good. Fear could make men reasonable. Where am I? Jin asked. What is this place? You're on Lothal, the soldier stammered. Outer Rim, capital city. You're under Imperial jurisdiction. A new sound interrupted. The mechanical stomp of more boots, many more, echoing from multiple directions. Reinforcements. Jin glanced at the towers above and saw more of those flying vehicles converging on his position, searchlights slashing through the darkness. He had fought impossible odds before. On Tsushima, outnumbered and broken, he had learned to become something other than samurai. He had become the ghost. Jin released the soldier and backed toward the shadows between buildings, katana still drawn. The soldier scrambled away, shouting into some kind of communication device on his wrist. Jin studied the approaching forces, dozens of white-armored soldiers, the flying vehicles, the coordinated precision of their response. This was an occupied land. These people, whoever they were, lived under tyranny as Tsushima had. And these soldiers, this empire, would soon learn what happened when they hunted a ghost. Jin Sakai melted into the darkness of Lothal's capital, leaving only the whisper of displaced air and the memory of impossible swordsmanship. Somewhere in this strange realm of metal towers and energy weapons, he would find answers. But first he would do what he had always done. Observe, learn, and prepare. The Empire had never faced a samurai before. They were about to discover their mistake. Jin moved through the shadows of Lothal's capital like smoke through ruins. The skills that had made him the ghost of Tsushima, reading patrol patterns, exploiting blind spots, moving with absolute silence, translated perfectly to this alien city. These Imperial soldiers were disciplined but predictable, their white armor making them easy to track, even in darkness. Within an hour, he had mapped 3 blocks of territory and identified what appeared to be a civilian sector. The buildings here were different from the towers. Lower, packed closer together, with the worn look of structures where ordinary people struggled to live. Jin recognized poverty when he saw it. Clothes hanging from improvised lines between buildings, the smell of cheap food, the tired faces of workers returning from long shifts. Occupation had the same face everywhere, it seemed. He dropped from a rooftop into a narrow alley, landing silently on the balls of his feet. His armor, the ghost armor he'd worn for so many raids against the Mongols, blended with the darkness, the black and gray leather treated to absorb light. Jin kept to the walls, avoiding the harsh illumination that poured from overhead lamps, these two suspended without visible support. Voices ahead made him freeze. 2 figures stood beneath one of those lamps, speaking in hushed but urgent tones. Neither wore Imperial armor. One was a young woman with short dark hair, dressed in practical work clothes stained with grease. The other was a boy, perhaps 16, his face bearing bruises that looked fresh. "Can't keep doing this, Sabine," the boy was saying. "They nearly caught you at the fuel depot. The Empire doesn't show mercy to vandals." The woman, Sabine, crossed her arms. "Vandals? We're freedom fighters, Ezra, and someone has to resist. The people are too afraid, the leaders too corrupt. If we don't act, you'll get executed, and then what good will you do?" Jin remained still, processing their words. Freedom fighters, resistance. The parallels to Tsushima sharpened with each passing moment. These people were occupied, controlled by this empire, and like his own people, some chose to fight back, while others counseled caution. A distant sound made all 3 of them tense, the synchronized march of Imperial boots. The boy, Ezra, pulled Sabine deeper into the shadows. "Patrol! We need to move!" They started toward Jin's position. He had seconds to decide, reveal himself or remain hidden. Every instinct screamed to stay concealed, to gather more information before exposing his presence. But these 2 were resistance fighters, or claimed to be. If anyone could explain this realm and its conflicts, it would be them. Jin stepped from the shadows, katana sheathed but hand resting on its grip. Both rebels froze. Sabine's hand dropped to a holster at her hip. Jin's eyes tracked the movement, noting the weapon there, similar to what the soldiers carried. Ezra raised his hands, palms forward, a gesture Jin recognized as peaceful intent. "Whoa," Ezra said softly. "I've never seen armor like that. Or that sword. You're not Imperial." "No," Jin agreed. "I am not." Sabine studied him with sharp, analytical eyes. "You're not from Lothal either. That accent, I can't even place what system you're from. And that blade, is that actual forged metal? Not a vibroblade?" Jin had no idea what a vibroblade was, but he understood the implication. "This is my katana. It has served my family for generations." The marching boots grew louder. Sabine made a quick decision. "Look, I don't know who you are or where you're from, but if you're standing in this alley holding a weapon, the Empire will shoot first and never bother with questions. Come with us or take your chances with the stormtroopers." Stormtroopers. So that's what the white armored soldiers were called. Jin weighed his options, limited all of them. He needed information, needed to understand this place before he could plan his next move. These rebels were his best option. "I will come," he said, "but know this. I have already fought your stormtroopers once tonight. I do not fear them." Ezra's eyebrows shot up. "You fought Imperials and you're still walking around? Either you're incredibly lucky or incredibly skilled." "Both, apparently," Sabine muttered. She gestured toward a maintenance hatch set into the building's wall. "This way, quickly." They descended into tunnels beneath the city. Service passages, Sabine explained, used for maintenance of the power grid and water systems. The Empire monitored them, but couldn't watch everywhere. Jin followed, memorizing the route automatically, noting exits and potential ambush points, old habits from a lifetime of warfare. The tunnels opened into a larger space, some kind of forgotten storage chamber filled with crates and outdated equipment. A handful of others waited there. A tall, broad-shouldered man with a cynical expression, a woman whose bearing suggested military training, and a massive creature covered in fur that made Jin's hand drift toward his katana before he controlled the reaction. "Kanan," Sabine called to the man. "We've got a situation. Found this guy in Sector 7. He's armed, definitely not local, and claims he fought stormtroopers tonight." Kanan's eyes, a striking green, fixed on Jin with an intensity that made something in the samurai's chest tighten. It was like being observed by something beyond human sight. Did he now? And he survived? "They still breathe," Jin said evenly. "I do not kill without necessity." "Noble sentiment," the woman said, her voice crisp with authority. "I'm Hera. This is our crew. You've met Sabine and Ezra. That's Zeb," she nodded to the furred creature. "And Kanan. We're rebels," Jin finished, "fighting against the Empire. I understand occupation. My own land suffered the same." Kanan moved closer, and that strange intensity increased. He circled Jin slowly, studying him with an expression of deep confusion. "There's something about you, something I can't quite. You're not force sensitive, but there's a discipline in you, a center that feels almost—" "Kanan," Hera interrupted gently, "let's start with basics. Who are you, stranger? And how did you end up on Lothal?" Jin considered his words carefully. These people had shown him hospitality, shared their hidden sanctuary. Honor demanded honesty, even if the truth sounded mad. "My name is Jin Sakai. I was, samurai of Tsushima, sworn to protect my people from invaders. I knelt in meditation at a sacred shrine, seeking guidance from my ancestors, and when I opened my eyes, I was here. In this place of metal towers and energy weapons, beneath stars I do not recognize." Silence filled the chamber. Zeb broke it with a rumbling laugh. "Right, and I'm the Emperor's nephew. Come on, mate. If you're on the run from the Empire, just say so. Don't need to spin fairy tales." But Kanan hadn't looked away from Jin. "You're telling the truth. Or at least, you believe you are. The confusion I sense, it's genuine." He paused. "Samurai. I've accessed a lot of historical databases in my time. Never heard that word? What system is Tsushima in?" "System?" Jin frowned. "It is an island, part of Japan. If you have maps of your lands, perhaps." Hera and Kanan exchanged glances. Something passed between them, some shared understanding that excluded the others. Ezra, Hera said quietly, access the Navi computer database. Search for any system, planet, or colony named Tsushima or Japan. Full galactic records. The boy pulled out a small device, another piece of impossible technology, and his fingers moved across its glowing surface. After a moment, he shook his head. Nothing. Not in the core, not in the outer rim, not in the unknown regions. These places don't exist. Jin's jaw tightened. Then your maps are incomplete. Our maps cover the entire known galaxy, Kanan said softly. Millions of systems. If your home isn't on them, then either it's so remote that no one's ever found it, or, he trailed off, unwilling to voice the alternative, or Jin was from somewhere else entirely, somewhere beyond their galaxy, their reality, the sacred shrine, the light that had consumed him, the impossible distance he'd felt while falling. Perhaps he had traveled farther than any map could measure. The Force works in mysterious ways, Kanan murmured, more to himself than anyone else. I've heard stories of rifts, of Force vergencies that could theoretically bridge impossible distances. But between galaxies, between dimensions, he focused on Jin again. Your meditation. You said it was at a sacred place. Did you feel anything unusual? Any sense of energy, of power? Jin thought back to those final moments. The humming stones, the presence of his ancestors stronger than ever before. And then, yes, he admitted, something answered my prayer, something vast. Kanan nodded slowly. The Force, it had to be. Somehow your discipline, your meditation, opened a door. And the Force pulled you through. He turned to Hera. This is bigger than a simple refugee situation. If the Force brought him here, there's a reason. The Force or not, Hera said pragmatically, he's here now, and the Empire will be looking for the man who attacked their patrol. Jin, may I call you Jin? You have a choice to make. You can try to survive on your own in a galaxy you don't understand, or you can work with us. We fight the Empire. We protect people who can't protect themselves. Sound familiar? It sounded like his entire life. Jin had been born to protect Tsushima, had broken himself to save it, had become the ghost when honor proved insufficient. And now in this impossible place, he found the same conflict, the same choice. On Tsushima, Jin said quietly, I learned that honor alone cannot defeat tyranny. I became something my people feared, used methods that shamed my family name. I won, but the victory left me, changed. Then you understand the cost of resistance, Hera replied. Good. We could use someone who knows how to fight, especially someone who can take on stormtroopers with nothing but a sword. Sabine grinned. I want to see that again. Properly this time. You may get your chance, Kanan said grimly. The Empire doesn't ignore incidents like tonight. They'll increase patrols, crack down harder. We need to accelerate our plans for the supply depot raid. He extended his hand toward Jin, palm up. Another gesture of this place, an offer. What do you say, samurai? Will you fight alongside us? Jin looked at the offered hand, then at the faces around him. Rebels against an empire. People who had chosen resistance over submission. They were not samurai, knew nothing of Bushido or honor codes, but they understood what mattered, protecting the innocent from those who would crush them. He clasped Kanan's forearm in the warrior's grip he'd learned from his father. I will fight, Jin Sakai said. But know this, I am both samurai and ghost. I will do what is necessary to win. If that troubles you, speak now. Kanan's grip tightened briefly, and that strange intensity flared in his eyes once more. Something tells me, Jin, that necessary is exactly what we need. The ghost had found a new war, and the Empire was about to learn what it meant to face a warrior from beyond their known galaxy. Lothal's twin suns rose over a city that bore the scars of occupation like old wounds. Jin stood on the rooftop of the rebels' safe house, watching the street-level patrols begin their rounds. After a restless night spent learning the basics of this galaxy, stars scattered across an incomprehensible void, entire worlds connected by something called hyperspace, weapons powered by energy instead of powder, he'd retreated to familiar ground. Observation. Below, civilians hurried to work with heads down, avoiding eye contact with stormtroopers. Market stalls opened under the watch of imperial officers who collected taxes that looked more like extortion. Children played in the spaces between patrols, their laughter dying the moment white armor appeared. Jin had seen this dance before, on Tsushima under Mongol occupation. Fear becomes routine. Survival becomes submission. Can't sleep? Jin turned to find Kanan climbing onto the roof, two steaming cups in his hands. The rebel offered one to Jin, who accepted it cautiously. The liquid inside was dark, bitter, and oddly energizing. Calf, Kanan had called it. I slept, Jin said. Lightly, old habit. Same here. Kanan settled beside him, legs dangling over the edge. Been thinking about what you said last night, about becoming the ghost. Want to tell me more about that? Jin sipped the calf, considering how much to share. But Kanan had offered trust by bringing him here, by not treating him as an enemy, despite his strangeness. Honor demanded reciprocity. When the Mongols invaded Tsushima, I fought them as samurai, with honor, facing them openly, according to the code my father taught me. Jin's hand drifted to his katana's hilt. We lost, badly. They slaughtered my clan, my friends, everyone who stood against them in honest combat. I survived, but only barely. And you changed tactics, Kanan said quietly. I learned from a thief, from peasants, from anyone who knew how to fight without honor. I used poison, fire, fear. I attacked from shadows, spread tales of a vengeful spirit haunting the invaders. The ghost, Jin's voice hardened. My uncle, Lord Shimura, he raised me after my father died. He said I was no longer samurai, that I had dishonored everything our family stood for. But you saved your people. Yes, at the cost of my soul, some would say. Jin looked at Kanan. Your friend Hera asked if I understand the cost of resistance. I understand it too well. Victory does not heal all wounds. Kanan was quiet for a long moment, staring at the occupied city below. The Jedi I knew, my master, she used to say that the Force isn't about rigid rules. It's about life, about protecting it however you can. The old Jedi Order before the Empire, they had codes, strict ones. No attachment, no emotion, absolute adherence to their interpretation of the light side. He paused. Most of them died following those codes. The ones who survived learned to adapt. You speak of them as though you knew them personally, Jin observed. A shadow crossed Kanan's face. I was training to be one, a Jedi. Then the Empire happened, and suddenly being who I was meant death. I survived by hiding what I was, by compromising, by doing things no Jedi would have done. He met Jin's eyes. So yeah, I understand the ghost. Sometimes honor is a luxury people in occupied territories can't afford. Before Jin could respond, Sabine's voice crackled from a device on Kanan's belt. Got eyes on the target. Imperial supply convoy, right on schedule. 3 transports, light escort. We've got maybe a 10-minute window. Kanan stood, draining his calf. That's our cue. Supply raid, food, medicine, equipment meant for the Imperial garrison. We hit fast, redistribute to the people, vanish before reinforcements arrive. You up for it? Jin rose, checking his equipment with practiced efficiency. Katana secure, tanto knife hidden, armor adjusted. He'd spent the night sharpening his blades on a whetstone Sabine had found, the familiar ritual grounding him in this alien world. What is the plan? Come on, Hera will brief us. In the safe house's main room, the crew gathered around a holographic projection, another impossible technology, blue light forming a 3-dimensional map of the city's warehouse district. Hera pointed to a specific intersection where the convoy route narrowed between buildings. Standard hijacking, she explained. Zeb and I block the front transport here. Sabine takes out their communications, keeps them from calling for backup. Kanan handles any resistance. Ezra coordinates the civilians we've got standing by to move the supplies. Her gaze shifted to Jin. The question is where you fit. We don't know your capabilities beyond swordsmanship, and the Empire will respond with blasters. Lots of blasters. Jin studied the map, analyzing it as he would any battlefield. The narrow street created a natural choke point, but it also limited escape routes. The convoy would have front and rear guards, possibly aerial support from those flying speeders. The rebels' plan was sound but left them exposed if things went wrong. Your approach is direct, Jin said. Honorable, but also predictable. The Empire will eventually learn your patterns. Prepare countermeasures. Sabine crossed her arms. You have a better idea? A complimentary one. Jin traced a road on the hologram, his finger moving through back alleys and rooftops. While you engage them directly, I approach from above and behind. When they focus on your ambush, I strike at their command element. Create chaos. Make them think they face attack from multiple sides. In confusion, the mind sees greater numbers than exist. Zeb chuckled, his gravelly voice amused. Classic misdirection. Not bad. It's risky, Hera said. You'll be alone, without comms or backup. If something goes wrong... I have fought alone many times, Jin replied simply. The ghost works best in isolation. Kanan exchanged another of those meaningful looks with Hera. All right, but you follow Sabine's signal. She takes out their communications. You see the disruption. That's your cue to move. And Jin, we're trying not to kill unless absolutely necessary. Stun shots when possible. These stormtroopers are people, most conscripted or brainwashed. They don't all deserve death. Jin thought of the Mongol soldiers he'd killed. How many had simply been men following orders, believing in their Khan's vision of conquest? How many might have been spared if he'd had another way? I will remember, he said, though he did not promise. On Tsushima, he'd learned that mercy could cost lives, of innocence, of allies. Sometimes the blade had to fall, but he would try for these rebels who still believed in restraint. 20 minutes later, Jin crouched on a rooftop overlooking the target intersection. His path here had been effortless. The buildings in this district were old, close together, with architectural features that made climbing simple. Below, the convoy approached, 3 large hover transports flanked by speeder bikes, stormtroopers visible at each vehicle station. Through gaps in the buildings, Jin spotted Hera's position. The Twi'lek woman, her species another shock, people with head-tails instead of hair, waited behind the controls of their own transport, ready to block the road. Zeb crouched beside her, massive and barely contained. On the opposite rooftop, Sabine prepared something at the lip of the building, her movements precise. The convoy entered the kill zone. Hera's transport roared to life, swinging out to block the street. The lead Imperial transport tried to swerve, failed, came to an abrupt halt. Speeder bikes scattered, their pilots shouting into communicators. Sabine threw something small and metallic. It arced through the air, landed on the center transport's communications array, and detonated with a sharp electromagnetic pulse that Jin felt even from his distance. A prickling across his skin, a brief interference with the lights nearby. The stormtroopers' communications went dead, their helmet displays flickering. Jin's cue. He ran along the rooftop's edge, building speed, then leaped. The distance was greater than any jump he'd made on Tsushima, but the gravity here felt slightly lighter, or perhaps adrenaline gave him strength. He cleared the gap, landed rolling on the opposite roof, and continued toward the convoy's rear. Below, chaos erupted. Kanan had ignited something impossible. A blade made of pure blue light, humming with power, deflecting blaster bolts with movements too fast to follow. Zeb charged into the stormtroopers with raw strength, his fists enhanced by some kind of energy knuckles. Sabine provided cover fire with twin pistols, her shots precise. But the rear guard hadn't engaged yet. 4 stormtroopers and an officer in a gray uniform, holding back, assessing the situation. The officer was speaking urgently into a backup communicator, trying to pierce Sabine's jamming. Jin dropped from the roof. He fell silent as snow, landing behind the officer in a crouch that absorbed impact. Before any stormtrooper could react, Jin's tanto flashed. Not a killing strike, but a precise cut across the communicator, destroying it. The officer spun, hand dropping to his sidearm. Jin's katana whispered from its sheath, the ancestral steel catching Lothal's sunlight. He held it in a middle guard, blade angled, weight centered. The officer's eyes widened at the sight, a figure in dark armor, face partially concealed by a mask, wielding a weapon that shouldn't exist in a galaxy of energy blades and plasma rifles. Ghost, Jin said quietly. letting the word carry the weight of threat. The stormtroopers opened fire. Jin moved through the volley like water through reeds, each step calculated, each dodge a product of lifetimes of training. Blaster bolts scorched the air where he'd been, but the ghost was already elsewhere. He closed the distance to the nearest stormtrooper, batted the rifle aside with his katana's flat, and struck the trooper's helmet with his pommel. The man dropped, unconscious. The second trooper tried to track him, but Jin was inside his guard, Tanto piercing the armor joint at the shoulder, painful but not lethal. The trooper's weapon clattered to the ground. Jin spun, katana slicing through the third trooper's rifle, rendering it useless, then swept the man's legs. A precise strike to the nerve cluster at the neck, and he too fell. The fourth stormtrooper backed away, weapon raised but hands shaking. "What are you?" he gasped. Jin met his eyes through the helmet's lenses. "The price of occupation." He struck the rifle from the trooper's hands, then delivered a swift kick that sent the man sprawling, stunned but alive. The officer had drawn his pistol, but Jin closed the gap before he could fire, disarmed him with a wrist lock, and pressed the tanto to his throat. "Order your men to stand down," Jin commanded. I can't," the officer stammered. "Then you die and they die, and for what? Cargo? Pride?" Jin's voice was cold, the ghost speaking now. "Choose." The officer, face pale, raised his free hand in surrender. "Stand down," he called to the remaining stormtroopers engaged with the rebels. "Stand down, damn it!" Confusion rippled through the Imperial forces. Some hesitated, lowering weapons. Others, better trained or more fanatical, continued fighting. But the momentum had broken. Within moments, Kanan and Zeb had subdued the remainder, leaving stormtroopers zip-tied and disarmed in the street. Hera surveyed the scene, then looked up at Jin on the transport's roof where he'd repositioned. "Fast work. Clean." "Efficient," Sabine added, impressed. "You took down 4 trained soldiers in seconds with just a sword and a knife. That's actually kind of terrifying." Ezra and a group of civilians emerged from hiding, rushing to the transports. They began unloading crates of food, medical supplies, equipment, people who'd lived under Imperial boots, now taking back what should have been theirs. Jin watched them, saw hope kindle in tired faces, and remembered the villages of Tsushima, greeting him as liberator after each Mongol camp fell. Some things transcended galaxies. Kanan approached, his lightsaber, Jin reminded himself, now deactivated and clipped to his belt. "You kept your word. Minimal casualties, maximum impact. The Empire will have a hell of a time explaining this to their superiors." "They will also hunt us with greater fury," Jin replied, climbing down from the transport. "Every victory invites escalation." "Truth, but that's tomorrow's problem. Today we got people fed." Kanan's expression turned serious. "You fought well, Jin. Better than well. But I need to know, can you keep operating like this? Following our rules? Working as part of a team? The ghost you described sounds like a lone wolf. We can't afford unpredictability." Jin cleaned his blades on a rag Sabine offered, considering the question carefully. On Tsushima, he had operated alone by necessity, trusted few, consulted none. It had been effective but isolating. These rebels functioned differently, as a crew, a unit, each member relying on the others. "I will adapt," Jin said finally. "You have shown me honor by trusting me. I will return that honor by fighting alongside you, not apart from you. But understand, if a moment comes where the choice is between your rules and protecting innocent lives, I will choose life. Always." Kanan studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Just try to give us warning before you go full ghost on us." "Yeah?" A commotion at the intersection's far end cut off Jin's response. Hera's voice cracked over the communication devices. "Imperial reinforcements incoming. ATS-T walkers, 2 of them, with full infantry support. We need to move now." Jin looked toward the sound of approaching metal footsteps. Heavy, mechanical, ominous. Around the corner appeared something from a nightmare. A 2-legged walking machine, taller than any building he'd seen, bristling with weapons. Its head swiveled toward the rebels, cannons tracking. What is that? Jin breathed. Bad news, Zeb growled. Very bad news. Move, people. The rebels scattered, civilians running with supplies, the crew falling into practiced retreat patterns. Jin found himself running alongside Kanan, ducking as the walkers' cannons opened fire, explosive bolts turning the street behind them into rubble. Welcome to the rebellion, samurai, Kanan shouted over the chaos. Hope you're ready for this. Jin glanced back at the advancing walkers, at the army of stormtroopers deploying behind them, at the scale of the Empire's response to a simple supply raid. On Tsushima, the Mongols had numbered in the thousands. Here, the Empire commanded entire worlds, fleets of ships, technology beyond imagining. But they had not faced the ghost. And now in this strange galaxy of wonders and terrors, Jin Sakai would teach them the same lesson the Mongols learned. No occupation is secure when one warrior refuses to submit. The rebels' hideout had shifted to a new location, an abandoned industrial complex on Lothal's outskirts, far from Imperial patrols. Jin sat cross-legged in an empty storage room, katana laid across his knees, mind disciplined in meditation. 3 days had passed since the supply raid. 3 days of lying low while the Empire searched with increasing desperation for the armored phantom their troopers described in terrified reports. He'd listened to intercepted Imperial communications, courtesy of Sabine's slicing skills. The descriptions were already distorting into legend. A demon warrior, a vengeful spirit, death incarnate wielding an ancient blade. The ghost was being born again, not in feudal Japan, but in a galaxy that had forgotten such fears. Good. Fear was a weapon sharper than any steel. Your meditation is different from Kanan's, a voice said. Jin's eyes opened to find Ezra standing in the doorway, curiosity written across his young face. He connects to something outside himself. You seem to go inward. Different disciplines, Jin replied. Your friend reaches for this force he speaks of. I reach for center, for the stillness taught by my father and his father before him. Ezra stepped into the room, clearly fascinated. Can I watch? I'm supposed to be training with Kanan, but he's helping Hera with navigation calculations. And honestly, meditation is usually boring. But the way you do it, there's something different. Jin considered refusing, but the boy reminded him of younger samurai he'd once trained on Tsushima. Eager, brave, but lacking the discipline that kept warriors alive. Sit, be silent. Observe without disturbing. Ezra settled across from him, attempting to mirror Jin's posture but fidgeting within seconds. Jin returned his focus inward, breathing deeply, centering his awareness. He thought of his father's teachings, of the stones at the shrine, of the code that had defined his entire existence until the air changed. It was subtle, like the shift before a storm, a pressure that hadn't been there moments before. Jin's eyes snapped open. Ezra had gone rigid, his face pale, staring at something behind Jin. Jin spun, hand flying to his katana. A figure stood in the doorway, tall, wrapped in dark robes, face concealed by a hood that seemed to swallow light. But what froze Jin's blood was the presence, a wrongness that emanated from this person like heat from flame. It felt diseased, corrupted, the opposite of the peace Jin sought in meditation. Fascinating, the figure said, voice smooth and cultured. The reports were accurate. A warrior from nowhere, fighting with primitive weapons, yet defeating trained Imperial soldiers. I had to see for myself. Ezra scrambled backward. Inquisitor, he gasped. The figure lowered his hood, revealing a gray-skinned face marked by red tattoos, yellow eyes that gleamed with predatory intelligence. The eighth brother, to be precise. And you, boy, are force-sensitive. Untrained, but present. The Empire has use for ones like you. Those yellow eyes shifted to Jin. But you're an anomaly. I sense discipline, focus, a warrior's mind honed to perfection. Yet you're not touched by the Force. How curious. Jin rose smoothly, katana in hand but not yet drawn. Leave. You are not welcome here. The Inquisitor laughed. Welcome? You speak to me of welcome? I am the Empire's will made manifest. Wherever I go, I am welcome by right of power. He stepped into the room, and Jin noticed the cylindrical device at his belt. Similar to Kanan's lightsaber, but different. more aggressive in design. Ezra, Jin said quietly. Run, alert the others. I can help. Run! The boy fled. The Inquisitor made no move to stop him, his attention fixed entirely on Jin. Protective, noble. How quaint. Tell me, warrior, where did you truly come from? No records exist of your world, your people, your fighting style. It's as if you materialized from nothing. My origins are not your concern, Jin replied. You hunt the rebels. I am one of them now. That is all you need to know. Ah, but I'm curious by nature, and the Empire rewards those who bring in valuable intelligence. The Inquisitor's hand drifted to his lightsaber. I'll give you one chance, warrior. Surrender. Come with me quietly. The Empire has use for skilled fighters, especially ones who inspire such terror in trained soldiers. Serve us, and you'll have power, resources, purpose. Jin thought of his uncle's men who joined the Mongols, who'd chosen collaboration over resistance. I have served tyrants before. I chose differently. My answer is the same now as it was then. No. Pity. The Inquisitor's lightsaber ignited, not blue like Canaan's, but crimson, the color of fresh blood. The blade hummed with a vicious, hungry sound. Then you'll die here, forgotten and alone. One more corpse in the Empire's long march to order. He struck. The lightsaber came at Jin in a diagonal slash. Impossibly fast. Jin sidestepped, his katana clearing its sheath in the same motion, steel meeting plasma in a clash that sent sparks cascading across the room. The impact jolted through Jin's arms. The lightsaber was weightless except for the hilt, all its force concentrated in that beam of destructive energy. The Inquisitor's eyes widened fractionally. Your blade, it should have melted. What metal is this? Jin didn't answer. He pressed the attack, falling into the stone stance. Aggressive, powerful, designed to overwhelm opponents with strength and commitment. His katana became a blur, striking high and low, testing the Inquisitor's defenses. But his opponent was skilled, terrifyingly so. The lightsaber moved in patterns Jin had never seen, circular guards that deflected his strikes with minimal effort, counterattacks that came from unexpected angles. Jin barely avoided a thrust that would have pierced his heart, felt the heat of the blade sear the air centimeters from his face. They separated, circling. The Inquisitor's expression had shifted from amusement to focus. You're trained, truly trained. Decades of discipline, I'd wager. But training against swords and spears won't save you against a lightsaber. The Force guides my hand. What guides yours? Necessity, Jin replied. He shifted to water stance. Fluid, defensive, designed for multiple opponents and rapid response. When the Inquisitor attacked again, Jin didn't meet force with force. He redirected, let the lightsaber slide past his blade, closed the distance where the longer weapon was less effective. His tanto flashed toward the Inquisitor's exposed ribs. The Inquisitor twisted, impossibly fast, and Jin realized his opponent had anticipated the move before he'd made it. That's what the Force was. Precognition, reading intent before action. Every attack Jin planned, the Inquisitor would sense. So Jin stopped planning. He let instinct take over, decades of combat experience flowing through muscle memory rather than conscious thought. Strike, retreat, feint, press. His body moved before his mind could formulate strategy. The katana became an extension of his will, responding to the Inquisitor's movements with adaptive fluidity. For 30 seconds, they fought in absolute silence, except for the clash of ancient steel against plasma technology. The Inquisitor's confidence cracked slightly. Jin saw it in the tightness around his eyes, the fractional hesitation before committing to strikes. Impossible, the Inquisitor hissed. You're suppressing your thoughts. No, you're not thinking at all. How? Mushin, Jin said. No mind, the state beyond thought. He executed a perfect heavenly strike, an overhead blow with his full weight and power behind it. The Inquisitor raised his lightsaber to block, and for the first time Jin's katana drove the energy blade back, forcing his opponent to give ground. But the victory was momentary. The Inquisitor's free hand extended, an invisible force slammed into Jin's chest. He flew backward, crashed into the wall hard enough to crack the metal paneling. Pain exploded through his ribs, drove the air from his lungs. The Inquisitor advanced, lightsaber raised for a killing blow. Impressive, truly. But without the Force, you're just a man with a sword. And men die easily. A blue lightsaber intercepted the killing stroke. Kanan had arrived, his blade locked against the Inquisitor's, his face set in grim determination. Pick on someone your own size, eighth brother. The Inquisitor disengaged, sneering. The failed Padawan. I was wondering when you'd show. How many of you are hidden on this miserable world? Two Force sensitives in this, he gestured at Jin. This anachronism with a metal sword. The Grand Inquisitor will be pleased. Tell him we send our regards, Kanan replied, then added quietly to Jin. Can you move? Jin forced himself upright, ignoring the fire in his ribs. Broken, possibly, but he'd fought through worse. I can fight. Then we hold him here while the others evacuate. Kanan's tone was urgent. This location is compromised. The Inquisitor's lightsaber began to spin, the hilt rotating, blade becoming a deadly circular saw. You think to hold me? I am Death Jedi. I am the Empire's judgment. You cannot. Jin threw his tanto. The small blade wasn't aimed at the Inquisitor, but at the spinning lightsaber hilt. It struck at the perfect angle, jamming the rotation mechanism. The lightsaber stuttered, stopped spinning, and in that moment of malfunction, Kanan struck. His blue blade caught the Inquisitor's shoulder, burning through robes and flesh. The Inquisitor screamed, staggered back, and Jin was there, katana sweeping toward his legs. The Inquisitor leaped, aided by the Force, clearing impossible height, and landed near the doorway. This isn't over, he snarled, clutching his wounded shoulder. The Empire knows you're here. Troop transports are en route. You have minutes at best. Run while you can, rebels. I'll enjoy hunting you. He vanished into the corridor, moving with inhuman speed. Kanan started to pursue, but Jin caught his arm. Let him go. Your people need us more. Kanan hesitated, then nodded. They ran through the complex, finding the crew already loading equipment into their ship, a vessel Hera called the Ghost, which Jin found grimly appropriate. Sabine was rigging explosive charges at the main entrance, Zeb carrying crates, Ezra helping civilians they'd been sheltering. Imperial transports landing 2 clicks north, Hera called from the cockpit. We've got maybe 3 minutes before they reach us. Charges are set, Sabine reported. This place will be a crater when they arrive. They loaded the last of the essential supplies. Jin climbed aboard, still clutching his ribs, katana bloodless but ready. As the Ghost's engines roared to life, he looked back at the complex they were abandoning, at the approaching dust clouds marking Imperial vehicles. The ship lifted off, and seconds later, Sabine triggered the charges. The complex erupted in flame and debris, destroying any evidence of their presence. Jin slumped against the cargo bay wall, letting exhaustion take him for just a moment. Kanan sat beside him, his own injuries minor but visible. That was an Inquisitor, Kanan said quietly. Force-sensitive agents trained to hunt Jedi and other Force users. They're among the Empire's deadliest assets. And you fought him to a standstill with nothing but a sword and skill. I survived, Jin corrected. He would have killed me without your intervention. Maybe, but you adapted faster than anyone I've seen against a Force user. That no-mind state, I've read about it in ancient texts, but I've never seen someone actually achieve it in combat. Kanan paused. The Inquisitor was right about one thing, though. The Empire knows about us now, knows about you specifically. They'll escalate, send more Inquisitors, maybe worse. Jin thought of the Mongols' response when the Ghost legend grew on Tsushima. More troops, better commanders, relentless pursuit. Then we become harder to find. Move faster, strike without pattern. The Ghost thrives when hunted. The Ghost, Kanan repeated thoughtfully. That's what the Imperials are calling you in their reports. The Black Ghost of Lothal. Your legend is spreading fast, Jin. People are talking, hoping, believing that someone is fighting back. He met Jin's eyes. Is that what you want? To become a symbol again? Jin looked at his katana, at the blade that had served his family for generations, now wielded in a war his ancestors could never have imagined. On Tsushima, the Ghost had been a mask he wore, a necessary evil that saved his people, but cost him everything he'd been raised to be. Here in this galaxy of impossible technology and mystical forces, perhaps the ghost could be something more. Not a compromise with honor, but a different kind of warrior entirely. On Tsushima, I had no choice, Jin said finally. Here, I choose to become the ghost. For these people, for this fight, if my presence inspires others to resist, then let the Empire fear my shadow. Kanan smiled grimly. Then we'd better teach you about this galaxy properly. Can't have the ghost of Lothal going into battle without understanding what he's really fighting for? Through the viewport, Jin watched Lothal shrink below them, the planet's occupied cities like wounds on its surface. Somewhere down there, the Inquisitor was reporting to his superiors, and the Empire was mobilizing to hunt the rebels with renewed fury. But Jin Sakai had fought empires before. He'd learned their patterns, exploited their arrogance, turned their strength against them. This empire was larger, more powerful, more technologically advanced than the Mongol horde. It would make their fall all the more devastating. The ghost had come to the stars, and legends once born could never be fully extinguished. 2 weeks aboard the ghost had taught Jin more about the galaxy than he could have imagined. Hera piloted them between worlds, Garrow for supplies, Stygian Prime for reconnaissance, a dozen nameless moons where rebel cells operated in shadow. Each jump through hyperspace, that impossible tunnel of light that bent distance itself, left Jin gripping his seat and wondering if his ancestors could see how far their descendant had traveled. But it wasn't the technology that challenged him most. It was understanding the war itself. The Republic lasted for 1,000 generations, Kanan explained one evening, projecting holographic images of golden-armored warriors wielding lightsabers. The Jedi served as peacekeepers, guardians of justice. Then came the Clone Wars, a galactic conflict orchestrated by a Sith Lord named Palpatine who played both sides. When the war ended, he declared himself emperor, executed the Jedi, and transformed the Republic into the Empire. Jin studied the images of burning temples, of Jedi cut down by soldiers who should have been allies. Betrayal on a scale I cannot comprehend. How many Jedi survived? No one knows. Dozens, maybe. Out of 10,000. Kanan's voice was hollow. I was just a Padawan, a student. My master sacrificed herself so I could escape. I spent years running, hiding what I was, until I met Hera. She reminded me that running isn't living. And now you fight, Jin said, with a handful of rebels against an empire that controls entire star systems? The odds seem impossible? Hera entered the common room, a datapad in hand. They are. But revolutions don't start with armies, Jin. They start with symbols, with hope. That supply raid you helped us with? The food we distributed? Imperial intelligence reports show civilian cooperation with their forces dropped 11% in that sector afterward. People saw that the Empire could be defied. Sabine, working on a new piece of armor at the workbench, added without looking up. And the reports about you are spreading. The Black Ghost who cuts down stormtroopers with an ancient blade. Some of the Outer Rim worlds are painting your symbol on walls. My symbol? Jin frowned. She activated a holographic image. Crude graffiti showing a stylized warrior in flowing armor. Katana raised with a single word beneath in a script Jin was learning to read. Ghost. Something twisted in Jin's chest. On Tsushima, his symbol had been meant to terrify invaders. Here it was becoming something else. A rallying cry for the oppressed. He thought of the villages he'd liberated. The gratitude in people's eyes mixing with fear of what he'd become. The Empire is responding, Hera continued, pulling up Imperial communications intercepts. They've tripled patrols on Lothal. 2 more Inquisitors have been dispatched to the sector. And there's this. She highlighted a particular message. They're offering a substantial bounty for information leading to the capture of the Black Ghost and known associates. 50,000 credits, enough to buy a small freighter. Bounty hunters, Zeb growled from where he was cleaning his bow rifle. Great, as if Inquisitors weren't enough. Ezra practicing with his own lightsaber in the corner, a lesson Kanan had reluctantly allowed Jin to observe, stopped mid-swing. Wait, doesn't that mean we're more valuable now? That's kind of cool. It means we're in more danger, Kanan corrected. Bounty hunters don't care about imperial ideology. They care about credits. They're unpredictable, skilled, and some of them are almost as dangerous as inquisitors. A proximity alarm chirped. Hera checked the display, then cursed in Ryle, her native language, musical but clearly profane. Speaking of which, we've got a ship on intercept course. Configuration matches a fire spray class patrol craft. That's a bounty hunter ship, Sabine finished. Could be anyone. Those vessels are popular with the professionals. Can we outrun them? Jin asked. Not without knowing what modifications they've made. Hera's hands flew across the controls. Chopper, redirect power to engines. Everyone else, strap in. This could get rough. The Ghost accelerated, but the pursuing ship matched them easily. Through the viewport, Jin saw it. A distinctive craft with vertical wings, painted in faded greens and reds, scarred by combat. It maneuvered with the precision of a predator, closing the distance despite Hera's expert piloting. They're hailing us, Ezra reported from the communication station. Ignore it, Hera ordered. Actually, a new voice crackled over the ship's speakers, mechanically distorted, cold, professional. I'd advise against that. I'm carrying 4 concussion missiles and a tractor beam, and I'm authorized to deliver my bounties alive or dead. Alive pays better, but I'm not particular. Kanan exchanged glances with Hera. This is a civilian transport. We're not who you're looking for. Transponder codes say you're the Ghost, registered to Hera Syndulla, known rebel operative. Manifest includes a Lasat, a Mandalorian, and, most interestingly, a human male matching descriptions of the Black Ghost. 50,000 credits for him alone. Additional bounties on the rest of you. A pause. Power down and prepare to be boarded, or I start shooting. You have 30 seconds to comply. Jin stood, moving toward the cargo bay. Where are the spacesuits? What? Jin, no! Kanan started. This hunter comes for me specifically. If I draw him away, you can escape. Jin found the suits Hera had shown him during the safety briefing, began pulling one on with awkward unfamiliarity. I will not let others die for my presence. You'll die in vacuum, Sabine protested, or he'll capture you and deliver you to the Empire for torture. That's not happening. 10 seconds, the bounty hunter's voice announced. Hera made a decision. Zeb, Sabine, gun turrets, Kanan, with me. Ezra, help Jin with that suit, properly, and then get to the escape pod bay. She fired the maneuvering thrusters, spinning the Ghost into an evasive roll. We're not surrendering, and we're not abandoning crew. The bounty hunter's response was immediate. Laser fire stitched across the Ghost shields, energy crackling as the defensive systems absorbed the impact. Hera dove toward a nearby asteroid field, small rocks orbiting a gas giant, offering cover but also danger. Sabine and Zeb returned fire from the dorsal and ventral turrets, their shots precise but unable to penetrate the fire spray's heavy armor. The bounty hunter pursued relentlessly, his piloting nearly matching Hera's as they wove between asteroids. This guy's good, Hera admitted, sweat beading on her forehead. Military training, maybe ex-Imperial. An asteroid exploded ahead of them, shattered by a missile. Debris pelted the Ghost's hull, scraping against shields already weakened by sustained fire. Shields at 40%, Chopper reported with a series of alarm beeps. Jin finished sealing the spacesuit, the helmet's heads-up display flickering to life with information he couldn't read. But the air supply indicator was clear enough. 30 minutes. Not much time. What's your plan? Kanan asked, igniting his lightsaber. Because if you're thinking of jumping ship and fighting him in space, the hunter expects you to run or fight conventionally, Jin interrupted, his mind already analyzing the tactical situation as he would any battlefield. He controls this engagement because he dictates the terms. We must change the equation. I'm listening, Hera said, banking hard to avoid another missile. You said this ship has an airlock, a boarding ramp. Jin pointed to the rear of the cargo bay. Lower it. Make him think you're surrendering, that you're preparing to be boarded. He'll just disable us fully and... Sabine stopped, understanding dawning. Oh, that's crazy. I like it. Kanan's eyes widened. You want to board his ship while we're moving through an asteroid field, in a spacesuit you barely know how to use. The ghost thrives on the impossible, Jin replied simply. Hera was quiet for 3 seconds, an eternity in combat, then grinned fiercely. Chopper, prepare the cargo ramp. Jin, you'll have one chance at this. The fire spray will approach to board us. When he's close enough, you jump. Magnetic grapples on that suit will help you stick to his hull. But you need to time it perfectly. Miss and you're floating in space until your air runs out. I have made difficult jumps before, Jin said, though never through vacuum toward a moving spacecraft. Shields at 20%, Chopper warned. Do it, Hera commanded. Everyone, brace for deceleration. I'm going to make this look like systems failure. The ghost shuddered, engines cutting, drifting into a slow tumble that appeared uncontrolled but was precisely calculated. The bounty hunter's ship slowed, circling like a predator, confirming its kill. Wise choice, the hunter's voice said. Opening your cargo bay now will speed this process considerably. Complying, Hera replied, her voice tight. Don't shoot. We're opening the ramp. Jin positioned himself in the cargo bay as the ramp began to lower. The atmosphere rushed out, replaced by vacuum silence. Through his helmet, he heard only his own breathing, loud and rhythmic. The fire spray approached, maneuvering to align with the ghost's cargo bay, its own boarding ramp extending. 30 meters. 20. Jin's hand rested on his katana, specially secured in a modified sheath that Sabine had helped him rig to the spacesuit. His tanto was strapped to his thigh. Traditional weapons for the most untraditional battlefield imaginable. 10 meters. Jin jumped. Vacuum provided no resistance, but also no reference. He tumbled, unable to orient himself with the instincts developed under gravity. For a terrifying moment, he thought he'd miscalculated, would miss entirely and drift into the void. Then his boot struck the fire spray's hull. Magnetic seals engaged, locking him to the surface. He was on the ship, clinging to its starboard side, completely exposed but unnoticed by the pilot focused on boarding the ghost. Jin activated the magnetic grips on his gloves. Sabine had shown him the controls, and began moving along the hull toward the cockpit. The ship's surface was scarred and pitted, marked by years of combat. Through viewports, he caught glimpses of the interior. Weapons racks, containment cells designed for captured bounties, and at the front, the pilot. The bounty hunter wore armor, not imperial, but something older, more personal. Green and red plates, a distinctive helmet with a T-shaped visor. Mandalorian, Jin realized, remembering Sabine's descriptions of her people. A culture of warriors bound by honor codes that might have resonated with samurai principles in a different context. But this Mandalorian hunted for credits, not honor. Jin reached the cockpit canopy. The hunter was focused on his instruments, preparing to board the ghost, unaware of the threat clinging to his hull like a shadow. Jin drew his katana, awkward in the bulky spacesuit, and drove it into the canopy seal. Alarms shrieked inside the cockpit. The Mandalorian's head snapped up, saw Jin through the transparasteel, and for a moment, their eyes met. The bounty hunter reached for his controls, but Jin was already moving, using the katana's leverage to pry at the canopy seal, forcing the mechanism. The canopy blew outward, explosive decompression venting the cockpit's atmosphere. The Mandalorian, already suited and helmeted, wasn't harmed, but his controls went haywire. The fire spray spiraled, engines firing randomly, and Jin was thrown free, tumbling through space. He fired the grapple line built into his suit, a tool Sabine had insisted he understand, and it caught on the fire spray's landing strut. The line went taut, arresting his tumble, and Jin swung back toward the ship. The Mandalorian was fighting to regain control, the vessel spinning toward a large asteroid. Jin pulled himself along the line, magnetic boots finding purchase again. The ship's violent maneuvering made each movement treacherous, but he'd crossed burning bridges in Tsushima, fought atop pitching ships during storms. Balance was balance, regardless of gravity. He reached the boarding ramp, still extended, and entered the ship's interior. Atmosphere remained in the passenger compartment, sealed from the compromised cockpit. Jin removed his helmet, breathing hard, and moved through the ship. The Mandalorian was already out of the cockpit, having sealed it behind him. He stood in the main corridor, blaster in one hand, vibroblade in the other, a weapon that hummed with energy similar to a lightsaber, but contained to the blade's edge. Impressive, the bounty hunter said. his voice unfiltered now, hard-edged but professional. The reports didn't mention tactical intelligence. They focused on swordsmanship and stealth. My mistake. Surrender, Jin said, drawing his katana properly now, letting the suit's gloves fall away for better grip. Your ship is damaged. You cannot continue this hunt. The Mandalorian tilted his head, studying Jin with that expressionless T-visor. I'm Mandalorian. We don't surrender. And 50,000 credits buys a lot of repairs. He holstered his blaster, holding only the vibroblade. You want to do this with honor? Blade against blade? Fine, I respect that. But you should know, I've killed 3 Jedi with this weapon. You're just a man with a sword. I have heard similar words before, Jin replied, settling into his stance. The speakers did not survive to learn their error. They charged simultaneously in the narrow corridor, and Jin discovered that fighting a Mandalorian warrior was entirely different from fighting stormtroopers or even the Inquisitor. This opponent had no force precognition, but his combat instincts were honed by centuries of warrior culture. His armor designed to withstand lightsabers, his vibroblade capable of blocking Jin's katana without shattering. They fought in brutal close quarters, each strike potentially fatal, each parry essential. The Mandalorian's armor gave him confidence to trade blows, accepting hits to protected areas while seeking openings in Jin's defense. Jin's katana rang against Beskar plates, unable to penetrate, while the vibroblade hissed past his face, cutting only air through speed and precision. You're good, the Mandalorian admitted, breathing hard. Better than good. Where did you train? What system produces warriors like you? One your maps do not contain, Jin replied, then executed a feint that drew the Mandalorian's guard high before sweeping low, not at his armor, but at his ankle joint where Beskar didn't cover. The katana's edge caught, not deep enough to cripple, but enough to hobble. The Mandalorian stumbled, compensated, but his stance had weakened. Jin pressed the advantage, driving him back toward the cargo bay. They entered the larger space, weapons clashing between containment cells and weapon racks. You're not killing me, the Mandalorian observed. Why? Because you fight with skill and courage, Jin said. Because you are a warrior, not a monster. You deserve better than death in the service of credits. Philosophical, but impractical. The Mandalorian triggered something on his wrist, and flames erupted from his vambrace, a flamethrower, driving Jin back with searing heat. The Empire pays well. Your rebels pay nothing. It's simple mathematics. Jin rolled behind a crate, avoiding the flames, then emerged from a different angle, forcing the Mandalorian to pivot on his injured ankle. The warrior was skilled, but pain degraded performance. Jin saw the openings multiply, saw victory approaching. He chose mercy instead. With a precise strike, Jin disarmed the vibroblade, sending it clattering across the deck. Before the Mandalorian could draw his blaster, Jin's tanto was at his throat, pressed against the seal between helmet and armor. Yield, Jin commanded. The Mandalorian was silent for a long moment, then slowly raised his hands. You win. What now? Execute me? No, I am not the Empire. Jin stepped back but kept his blade ready. Tell me your name. Ekron Keel, the Mandalorian replied. Clan Keel, though they disowned me years ago for taking Imperial contracts. Then you are Ronin, Jin said quietly. A warrior without master or clan. I understand that existence. He gestured to the damaged ship. Your hunt ends here, Ekron Keel, but your life does not. Repair your ship. Return to your people if they will have you. Or find a new path that does not serve tyrants. The bounty is worthless if you are dead. I could have killed you. I chose not to. Honor that choice by choosing differently yourself. Through the still open boarding ramp, Jin saw the ghost approaching, Hera having regained control and circled back. The Mandalorian saw it too, calculated his options, and slowly nodded. You fight like a Mandalorian, Keel said. Like we're supposed to fight, before so many of us sold our honor for Imperial credits. Maybe you're right. Maybe this isn't the way. He paused. The Empire will send others, better hunters. You can't talk down all of them. Then I will defeat all of them, Jin replied simply. Until the Empire learns that some warriors cannot be bought, cannot be broken, cannot be killed by credits alone. He leaped across the gap between ships, easier now with practice, and landed in the ghost cargo bay. Hera sealed the ramp immediately, pulling away from the crippled fire spray. Kanan helped Jin remove the spacesuit, his expression somewhere between impressed and horrified. You boarded an enemy ship in vacuum, fought a Mandalorian bounty hunter in single combat, and let him live. Yes, Jin confirmed. That's either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever witnessed, Zeb said. Possibly both. Sabine was grinning fiercely. You fought a Mandalorian and won. With honor. That's going to spread, Jin. Among my people, stories like that matter. You just made an impression that goes beyond the Empire's propaganda. Through the viewport, Jin watched the fire spray limp away toward a different trajectory, escaping into hyperspace. Ekron Keel would survive, would remember this day, would perhaps question the path he'd walked. Or perhaps he'd return with reinforcements and better weapons. Jin couldn't control that. He could only control his own choices, his own actions. On Tsushima, he'd learned that the ghost required pragmatism over idealism. Here, in this galaxy of impossible scale, perhaps he could find balance between the two. Set course for the next mission, Jin said quietly, turning from the viewport. The Empire knows we're here. Let's give them more to fear. Hera's smile was predatory. I like how you think, Samurai. Strap in. We're heading to Gorel. There's an Imperial weapons facility that's about to have a very bad day. The ghost jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind another legend, another story, another reason for occupied people to believe that resistance was possible. And somewhere in the void between stars, the Black Ghost's reputation grew darker, more dangerous, more necessary with every passing moment. Gorel was a bustling trade world, its markets legendary across the Outer Rim. But beneath the legitimate commerce, the Empire had established a weapons depot, officially labeled a security outpost. But intelligence from Fulcrum, the rebels' mysterious contact, confirmed it housed advanced prototype weapons destined for frontline Imperial units. Jin stood on a rooftop overlooking the depot, wrapped in shadow as Gorel's 3 moons rose above the cityscape. Below, the facility sprawled across 6 blocks, reinforced walls, guard towers, patrol patterns he'd spent 2 days memorizing. 50 stormtroopers minimum, 4 ATST walkers, and an officer corps housed in the central command building. You're certain about this? Kanan's voice crackled through the communication device in Jin's ear. A small piece he'd reluctantly accepted, understanding its tactical value. The patrols follow the same pattern every 4 hours, Jin replied quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. They rely on technology, sensors, cameras, automated systems. They do not expect infiltration from someone who leaves no electronic trace. Because you don't use electronics, Sabine added over the channel. She was positioned 3 blocks away with her sniper configuration, covering Jin's approach. Just old-fashioned stealth and skill, it's actually kind of brilliant. Their sensors are designed to detect power signatures, heat from weapons, communication devices. You're practically invisible to them. Until he gets close enough that Mark 1 eyeballs spot him, Zeb grumbled. The Lasat was with Hera and Ezra at the extraction point, ready to move in with the ghost if things went catastrophically wrong. Jin checked his equipment one final time. Katana and Tanto secured, the latter poisoned with a sedative Sabine had synthesized, non-lethal but effective. Rope and grappling hook. Several smoke bombs repurposed from the rebels' supplies. A handful of makeshift explosives that Sabine had taught him to arm. And most importantly, the lessons learned from 2 weeks of studying this galaxy's technology and tactics. The Ghost of Tsushima had adapted. Beginning approach, Jin said, then removed the communication device and tucked it into a pouch. No distractions now, only the mission. He descended from the rooftop using a drainage pipe, moved through an alley where sensor coverage overlapped inefficiently, and reached the depot's outer wall. 20 feet of reinforced duracrete topped with sensor arrays. The Empire built walls as the Mongols had built their camps. Imposing, technological, confident, also predictable. Jin found the guard tower's blind spot, a 5-second gap when the rotating sensor swept past, but before the next tower's coverage began. He threw his grappling hook, the rope wrapped to muffle sound, and climbed with the speed of decades practicing such infiltrations. At the wall's top, he paused, listening. Voices below. Two stormtroopers on patrol, walking the interior perimeter, complaining about duty rotation and ration quality. Human voices, Jin reminded himself. Men who might have families, who might serve the Empire through conscription rather than choice. He thought of Ekron Keel, the Mandalorian whose life he'd spared. But these men guarded weapons that would kill innocents. Their humanity didn't absolve their service. Jin dropped behind them, silent as falling snow. His tanto flashed twice, precise strikes to nerve clusters, enhanced by the sedative. Both troopers collapsed unconscious within seconds. He dragged them into shadow, arranged them in sitting positions against the wall where casual observation might miss them. The depot's layout matched the intelligence Fulcrum had provided. Jin moved through shadows between buildings, avoiding searchlights and patrol routes, reaching the central warehouse where the prototype weapons were stored. The door was sealed with an electronic lock, technology he couldn't bypass without alerting security, so he didn't use the door. A ventilation shaft on the building side, designed for climate control, was large enough for a man. Jin removed the grating with his tanto, slipped inside and crawled through ducts that reminded him of castle crawl spaces in Japan. Different materials, same principle. Fortresses always had weak points invisible to their builders. He emerged in a storage area above the main warehouse floor. Below, rows of crates stretched into darkness, illuminated by occasional work lights. 4 stormtroopers guarded the entrance, and 2 officers examined data pads near a central control terminal. Jin studied the terminal, the target. Sabine had explained that destroying it would corrupt the facility's inventory system, making it impossible to track which weapons went where. Chaos in Imperial logistics meant delayed shipments, confused commanders, and opportunities for rebel intercepts. But 6 guards were too many to subdue quietly. Jin needed a distraction. He retraced his path through the ventilation system, emerged outside, and moved toward the depot's power generator, a humming structure on the facility's eastern edge. 2 guards stood watch, alert but not expecting threat from a direction sensors covered completely. They didn't know the sensors couldn't see the ghost. Jin approached from directly behind the first guard, his footsteps timed to mask with the generator's mechanical rhythm. One hand covered the guard's mouth, the other drove the poisoned tanto into his armor's weak point. The guard struggled briefly, then went limp. The second guard turned at the sound, saw his companion collapsing, reached for his weapon. Jin threw his tanto, a technique he'd practiced thousands of times, and the blade took the guard in the throat, precisely between helmet and chest plate. The man fell without a sound. Jin retrieved his tanto, regret settling heavy in his chest. He'd tried for non-lethal, but the guard's reflexes had been too fast. Some deaths were unavoidable in war. He placed explosive charges on the generator, small, precise, timed for 90 seconds. Then he moved back toward the warehouse, counting down mentally. 70 seconds, 60, 50. He re-entered the warehouse through the ventilation system, positioned himself above the control terminal. Below, the officers continued their work unaware. 20 seconds. 10. The generator exploded. Lights died throughout the facility. Emergency systems kicked in after 3 seconds of total darkness. Just enough time for Jin to drop from the ceiling, land silently, and move between the confused guards. His katana whispered from its sheath. 2 officers fell unconscious from pommel strikes before they understood what was happening. The stormtroopers raised weapons, shouting into communicators that weren't responding. The power failure had disrupted internal communications. Jin became the ghost. He moved through the darkness like wind through bamboo, visible only in flashes when emergency lights flickered. His katana deflected panicked blaster fire, the ancient steel guided by instinct and timing. He struck pressure points, disarmed opponents, used the guards' confusion against them. One trooper managed to trigger an alarm before Jin's tanto found his weapon hand. The blade cut through armor plating. Sabine had enhanced its edge with some kind of molecular bonding, and the alarm device clattered to the floor. But the damage was done. Warning klaxons blared throughout the facility. Jin had minutes at best before overwhelming response arrived. He reached the control terminal, pulled out the explosive charge Sabine had prepared specifically for this. A small device with a single activation button, marked in colors he could recognize. He placed it at the terminal's base, armed it, and turned toward the exit. The warehouse doors burst open. An ATST walker ducked through, barely fitting, weapons tracking, searchlights stabbing through the darkness. Behind it, a full squad of stormtroopers in tight formation. And in front of them, a figure that made Jin's breath catch. The Inquisitor, eighth brother, stood with his double-bladed lightsaber ignited, both crimson ends casting bloody light across the warehouse. His yellow eyes fixed on Jin with recognition and fury. "I knew you'd come here," the Inquisitor said, his voice carrying over the alarms. "Fulcrum's intelligence was too good to be coincidence. We leaked it specifically, Samurai. This is a trap, and you walked right into it." Jin's hand tightened on his katana. Behind him, the explosive counting down. In front, an opponent who could read his intentions through the Force, backed by overwhelming firepower. No visible exit except through the enemy. The Ghost had faced impossible odds before. "Then your trap is incomplete," Jin replied, and threw a smoke bomb at the walker's feet. Thick smoke erupted, obscuring vision but not sensors. The ATST fired blindly, energy cannons obliterating crates and sending shrapnel flying. Jin dove, rolled, came up running toward the warehouse's side wall. He grabbed another explosive from his pouch, armed it, and threw it at the wall's base. The explosion blew a hole through reinforced duracrete. Jin leaped through even as blaster fire chased him, landing in an external courtyard. Searchlights swiveled toward the breach, illuminating him completely. "All units converge!" the Inquisitor's voice commanded. "Do not let him escape!" Jin ran, not in panic but with calculated purpose, heading toward the depot's northern perimeter, where a maintenance gate offered the weakest point. Behind him, the ATST crashed through the warehouse wall, pursuing with mechanical determination. Stormtroopers poured from barracks, forming a net. The Inquisitor moved faster than them all, augmented by the Force, lightsabers spinning as he closed the distance. "You cannot outrun me, Ghost! I am death incarnate!" Jin reached the maintenance gate, slashed through its electronic lock with his katana, and kicked it open. Beyond lay Gorel's industrial district, a maze of warehouses and factories. Cover, options. But the Inquisitor was already there, having leaped an impossible distance to land directly in Jin's path. The lightsaber came down in an executioner's strike. Jin met it with his katana, the impact sending sparks cascading through the night. They broke apart, circled, and Jin saw the trap's full extent. Stormtroopers emerging from buildings around them, forming a perimeter. 30 soldiers, one Inquisitor, and a samurai alone in the center. "Surrender," the Inquisitor commanded. "Your legend ends tonight." Jin thought of his uncle's words, spoken when the Ghost's reputation had grown too fearsome. "You are no longer samurai. You have become something I do not recognize." Perhaps that was the point. Samurai fought with honor and died gloriously. The Ghost fought to win, whatever the cost. "My legend," Jin said quietly, "is only beginning." He reached into his pouch for the last item Sabine had given him, a detonator linked to charges he'd secretly placed throughout the depot during his initial infiltration, positioned during those 2 days of reconnaissance. Insurance, she'd called it, a final option when all others failed. Jin pressed the button. The depot's ammunition storage exploded first, a massive detonation that lit the night like dawn. Then the fuel reserves, creating a chain reaction that consumed building after building. The shockwave knocked stormtroopers from their feet, shattered windows across 3 blocks, and sent the ATST walker crashing onto its side. The Inquisitor, anchored by the Force, remained standing, but was forced to shield himself from flying debris. Jin ran into the chaos, using smoke and fire as cover. He heard the Inquisitor's furious roar behind him, felt the wrongness of the dark side user's presence pursuing through the destruction. But the Ghost was already gone, vanishing into Gorel's labyrinthine streets, becoming one with shadow and smoke. 3 blocks away, the Ghost's engines hummed. Hera had the boarding ramp down, Sabine providing cover fire with her pistols, keeping stormtroopers pinned down. Jin sprinted the final distance, leaped aboard, and the ship was airborne before the ramp fully closed. "Did you get the terminal?" Ezra asked urgently. "Destroyed," Jin confirmed, breathing hard, "along with most of the depot." "Most?" Kanan looked at him sharply. Jin, the plan was surgical. Destroy the terminal. Extract quietly. What happened? It was a trap. The Inquisitor knew we were coming. Jin moved to the viewport, watched Gorel shrink below as they climbed toward orbit. He used their intelligence against us. Fulcrum's intel was compromised? Hera's voice was tight. That's very bad. If the Empire knows about Fulcrum, we need to warn them, Kanan interrupted. Immediately. But Jin barely heard the conversation. He stared at his reflection in the viewport, at the face of a warrior who'd just destroyed an entire Imperial facility, who'd trapped dozens of soldiers in an inferno to ensure his own escape. On Tsushima, such actions had won the war, but cost his soul. Here they would call him hero. The contradiction tore at him. Jin, Sabine's hand on his shoulder brought him back. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Pun somewhat intended. I am considering the cost, Jin said quietly. Those soldiers in the depot. Most will survive, but some will not. I made that choice, prioritize mission over mercy. It is the ghost's way. It's war's way, Sabine replied. You think I don't carry those choices? Every Mandalorian does. Every soldier, rebel or Imperial. The question isn't whether you feel the weight, it's whether that weight stops you from protecting people who need protecting. Jin thought of villages on Tsushima, of people freed from Mongol occupation, of the civilians on Lothal and Gorel, who might now receive supplies meant for Imperial troops, who might see the depot's destruction and believe resistance was possible. The weight does not stop me, Jin said, but I will not pretend it doesn't exist. Good, Kanan said, joining them at the viewport. The day you stop feeling it is the day you become what we're fighting against. He paused. The Inquisitor mentioned Fulcrum. That complicates things significantly. We need to... A priority transmission interrupted him. Hera routed it to the common room speakers. A voice Jin hadn't heard before, electronically distorted, careful, spoke with urgent precision. Ghost Crew, this is Fulcrum. I'm aware the Gorel mission was compromised. The Empire is hunting me now, and I've gone dark. This may be my final transmission for some time. I have critical intelligence about a coordinated Imperial operation targeting multiple rebel cells across 3 sectors. You need to reach the Phoenix Squadron rendezvous before... Static consumed the message. Fulcrum, Hera called. Fulcrum, come in! No response, only the empty hiss of dead communications. Zeb cursed colorfully in Lasat. Ezra looked scared. Kanan's face was set in grim determination. And Jin understood that the small war they'd been fighting, raids, supply runs, minor operations, was about to become something far larger and more dangerous. Phoenix Squadron, Hera said finally. That's the larger rebel cell we've been supporting. If the Empire is moving against them, then we go to warn them, Kanan finished. Set course, Hera. Maximum speed. The Ghost jumped to hyperspace, carrying with it a warrior from another world. Rebels against an Empire, and the growing legend of a ghost who could not be caught, could not be killed, and would not stop fighting until the occupied worlds knew freedom. But legends Jin knew from bitter experience always came with a price. And the bill was coming due faster than anyone could have anticipated. The Phoenix Squadron operated from a collection of ships, not a permanent base, but a mobile fleet that jumped between systems to avoid Imperial detection. Their flagship, a modified Pelta-class frigate called the Phoenix Home, served as command center for the largest organized rebel cell in the sector. Jin stood in the frigate's briefing room, surrounded by more rebels than he'd seen in one place since arriving in this galaxy. 30 officers, pilots, and operatives representing cells from a dozen worlds. At the head of the table stood Commander Jun Sato, an older human whose weathered face spoke of decades fighting losing battles with dignity intact. The Empire has increased patrols across all our operational zones, Sato was explaining, gesturing to a holographic star map. We've lost contact with cells on Makapo and Teralov. Either they've gone dark voluntarily, or they've been captured. Intelligence suggests the latter. Hera leaned forward. What about Fulcrum's warning? The coordinated operation? We're still analyzing the fragment you received, another officer replied. Ahsoka Tano, a Togruta woman whose presence made Kanan sit straighter, more attentive, Jin had learned she was a former Jedi, one of the few who'd survived the Empire's purge, and now worked as Fulcrum, the mysterious contact who'd been feeding rebels intelligence. But the pattern is clear. The Empire isn't just hunting us randomly anymore. They're using coordinated sweeps, cutting off supply lines, isolating cells before eliminating them systematically. They're learning, Jin said quietly. All eyes turned to him, the newcomer, the stranger, the black ghost whose reputation had spread even here. On Tsushima, when the ghost became effective, the Mongols adapted. They fortified camps, increased patrols, set traps. The Empire does the same. They study their enemy and evolve their tactics. Ahsoka studied him with eyes that seemed to see through surface appearances. You speak from experience. Kanan mentioned you come from elsewhere, beyond the known systems. Beyond the known galaxy, Kanan corrected, possibly from another dimension entirely. The Force brought him here. Murmurs rippled through the assembled rebels. Jin ignored them, focused on the tactical situation. If the Empire hunts systematically, they will have prioritized targets. Which cells are most vulnerable? Sato highlighted 3 systems on the map: Ibar, Ryloth, and our newest cell on Selos. Ibar has limited defensive capability. They're mostly support operatives. Ryloth is Hera's homeworld, heavily occupied but with strong resistance networks. Selos is, he paused, 3 retired clone troopers, veterans who fought in the Clone Wars before the Empire. They're not strategically valuable, but symbolically, they're witnesses, Jin interrupted, understanding immediately. They know what the Empire was, what it became. Their testimony could inspire others. The Empire will want them silenced. Ahsoka nodded slowly. That's our assessment, but we lack the resources to defend all 3 locations simultaneously. We have to choose. The room fell silent. Jin recognized this moment. The weight of command, of knowing your decisions would save some and condemn others. On Tsushima, he'd faced such choices when deciding which villages to liberate first, which battles to fight. There were never enough warriors for every fight. Ryloth is my home, Hera said, voice strained. My family is there. My father leads the resistance. If the Empire moves against them, then they face a prepared, experienced resistance, Sato said gently. Ibar has no such defense. They'll be slaughtered. What of Selos? Jin asked. 3 veterans. Are they capable fighters? Kanan smiled grimly. Clone troopers were engineered to be the galaxy's finest soldiers. If they're the ones I've heard about, Captain Rex and his squad, they're among the best who ever lived. 3 of them could hold off a company if properly positioned. But they're old, Ezra pointed out, and isolated. One AT-AT walker could destroy their position. Jin thought of the samurai masters on Tsushima, aged but lethal, whose experience compensated for diminished physical capability. Experience is a weapon that does not dull with age. If these clones are as skilled as you say, they will not fall easily. That's still asking them to fight alone, Sabine protested. Without support, without backup, it's abandoning them. No, Jin said. It is trusting them. If we spread our forces thin trying to protect everyone, we protect no one effectively. But if we prioritize based on capability, defend Ibar because they cannot defend themselves, trust Ryloth's established resistance, and have faith that these clones can hold until reinforcements arrive, we maximize our effectiveness. Ahsoka was watching him with that penetrating gaze. You think like a general, like someone who's commanded during impossible circumstances. I think like someone who has lost too many people by trying to save everyone, Jin replied quietly. On Tsushima, I learned that hard choices are sometimes the only choices that work. Sato considered this, then nodded decisively. We'll dispatch 3 ships to Ibar, enough firepower to evacuate the cell and deter pursuit. Hera, take the ghost to Ryloth. Coordinate with your father, reinforce their defenses, but be ready to extract if the situation becomes untenable. The clones on Selos, he paused. I'll send a warning. It's all we can spare. I will go to Selos, Jin said. The room erupted in protest. Kanan stood abruptly. Jin, no. You're one person against a potential Imperial task force? I am the ghost, Jin interrupted. One warrior has always been enough, and if these clones are as skilled as you say, 4 warriors will be a force the Empire does not expect. You don't even know them, Sabine argued. What if they refuse your help? What if they've given up fighting? Then I will fight alone, as I have before. Jin met Sato's eyes. Commander, you lack resources for this mission. I require no ship, no supply line, no support. Send me in a shuttle. I will reach them and prepare defenses. If the Empire comes, they will find their hunt more costly than anticipated. Ahsoka stepped closer to Jin, her presence radiating something he'd felt before. That strange intensity Kanan possessed, but stronger, more refined. You know this is likely a one-way mission. Even if you survive the battle, extraction under Imperial assault will be nearly impossible. I did not come to this galaxy seeking safety, Jin replied. I came because the Force, or my ancestors, or fate, placed me here. If my purpose is to stand with 3 old soldiers against an empire, so be it. Silence stretched. Then Ahsoka smiled, sad but genuine. The Force works in mysterious ways. Perhaps it brought you here for exactly this reason. She turned to Sato. I support his plan. It's tactically sound and strategically. The Ghost's reputation might actually deter Imperial forces more effectively than a squadron of fighters. Kanan looked torn, but finally nodded. I'll pilot him to Cielos. The Ghost crew stays together. No, Jin said firmly. Hera needs you on Ryloth. Your people need you. I need no one. You're part of the crew, Kanan insisted. We don't abandon crew. Jin thought of the bonds he'd forged on Tsushima, the few companions who'd stood with the Ghost despite the dishonor. He thought of Yuna, Masako, Ishikawa, friends who'd accepted what he'd become. These rebels had offered him the same acceptance. Then honor my choice, Jin said quietly. Let me do what I do best, alone in shadow against impossible odds. The Ghost thrives there. Hera's voice cracked over the intercom. We've got incoming. 3 Imperial Star Destroyers just dropped out of hyperspace. They've found us. Chaos erupted. Officers ran to battle stations. Alarms blared. The frigate's engines rumbled to life. Through the viewports, Jin saw the massive wedge-shaped vessels, each one larger than Tsushima's entire castle, bristling with weapons, launching swarms of smaller fighters. All ships, scatter formation, Sato commanded. Jump to predetermined coordinates. We regroup at... An explosion rocked the Phoenix home. Shields flared, absorbing turbo laser fire, but more impacts followed. The Empire wasn't just attacking, they were overwhelming. They're jamming hyperspace coordinates, a technician reported, panic in his voice. We can't jump. Jin understood immediately. This was the coordinated operation Fulcrum had warned about. The Empire had found Phoenix Squadron's location and committed overwhelming force to destroy it. Every rebel ship here was targeted for elimination. Ahsoka ignited twin lightsabers, white blades unlike any Jin had seen. We need to buy time for the technicians to break the jamming. All combat-capable personnel to the hangar bays. Defend the ship. Jin followed the surge of rebels toward the hangar, but the ship shuddered again, more violently. A blast door sealed ahead of them, emergency protocols isolating damaged sections. They were cut off from the main hangar. Secondary hangar, Kanan directed, leading a smaller group, Jin, Sabine, Ezra, and a handful of rebel soldiers, through alternate corridors. Lights flickered, smoke-filled passages, and the sounds of hull breaches echoed through the frigate. They reached the secondary hangar to find it already compromised. A boarding party, Imperial stormtroopers supported by an Inquisitor Jin hadn't seen before, a slender woman with a double-bladed lightsaber, had cut through the bay doors and was slaughtering the minimal guard force. Third sister, Kanan breathed. This is bad. The Inquisitor's head snapped toward them, her yellow eyes fixed on Jin with immediate recognition. The Black Ghost. How convenient. 2 priorities in one location. Eliminate rebel leadership and capture the Phantom Warrior terrorizing Imperial forces. This day improves remarkably. Her lightsaber spun, the double blades creating a disk of crimson death as she advanced. Behind her, 20 stormtroopers raised weapons. Jin drew his katana. Beside him, Kanan ignited his lightsaber. Sabine armed both pistols. Ezra activated his own blade with a frightened but determined expression. Ezra, Sabine, handle the troopers, Kanan ordered. Jin, with me, we take the Inquisitor. Adorable, the third sister purred. You think 4 rebels and a primitive swordsman can stop an Inquisitor and a fully armed squad? Your confidence is... Jin threw his tanto. The blade flew true, but the Inquisitor deflected it casually with the force, sending it clattering across the deck. She laughed. Did you truly think? The tanto exploded. Sabine's modification, activated by a remote detonator Jin had triggered while drawing his katana. The explosion wasn't large, but at close range it shattered the Inquisitor's concentration. Jin and Kanan struck simultaneously, katana and lightsaber converging on the disoriented Force user. She recovered with inhuman speed, blocking both attacks, but her smug confidence had fractured. Clever, but tricks only work once. The battle became chaos. Jin and Kanan fought in unexpected synchronization, the Jedi's force-enhanced precognition complementing the samurai's reflexive no-mind state. They covered each other's openings, created combination attacks the Inquisitor struggled to counter. Behind them, Sabine and Ezra fought with the desperation of youth facing overwhelming odds. Blaster fire and lightsaber clashes echoed through the hangar as more stormtroopers poured through the breech doors. We can't hold this position, Sabine shouted over the chaos. There! Ezra pointed to a shuttle at the far end of the hangar. If we can reach it, you'll reach nothing but death or none, the third sister snarled. She extended her hand, an invisible force seized Ezra, lifting him from his feet. The boy gasped, clawing at his throat as the Inquisitor began to choke him. Kanan screamed, tried to break away to help his student, but the Inquisitor's lightsaber kept him pinned defensively. Jin made a decision. He abandoned his duel, sprinted toward the Inquisitor's exposed flank, and struck, not at her, but at the deck beneath her feet. His katana, enhanced by Sabine's molecular edge, cut through the metal plating. Jin kicked the weakened section, and it buckled under the Inquisitor's weight. She fell, concentration broken, releasing Ezra. But she caught herself with the force, floating above the gap, fury blazing in her yellow eyes. You dare! The Phoenix home lurched violently. Another massive impact, close enough to throw everyone from their feet. Atmosphere began venting through the compromised hangar, a hull breach somewhere in the base structure. Emergency seal activating, a mechanical voice announced. Blast doors began closing, designed to contain the breach and prevent decompression from spreading. The shuttle! Kanan grabbed Ezra, half dragging the gasping boy toward the intact vessel. Move! They ran as atmosphere roared past them toward the breach. Stormtroopers were sucked toward the gap, grabbing onto structural supports, their armor protecting them from vacuum, but not from the terror of potential death. The Inquisitor anchored herself with the Force, but even she struggled against the violent decompression. Jin reached the shuttle last, leaped through the boarding ramp seconds before the blast doors sealed completely. Sabine was already in the pilot's seat. Kanan helping Ezra breathe, rebels strapping into crash seats. Go! Kanan ordered. Sabine fired the engines. The shuttle blasted through the compromised hangar opening, barely large enough, scraping shields against twisted metal, and emerged into the chaos of the space battle. Star Destroyers dominated the void, their turbo lasers creating a lethal web around Phoenix Squadron's ships. Rebel vessels dodged and weaved, returning fire with desperation. Explosions blossomed in vacuum silence as fighters on both sides died. Phoenix Home is retreating, Sabine reported, her hands flying across controls Jin couldn't begin to understand. Most of the squadron is scattering, jumping as soon as they clear the jamming field. Where do we go? Ezra asked, voice hoarse from the force choke. Kanan looked at Jin, at the warrior who'd proposed the impossible mission, who'd been willing to face an Imperial assault alone. Sealos, Kanan said. We go to Sealos. If the Empire found Phoenix Squadron, they'll hit every rebel position in the sector. Those clones need warning, and they need help. Jin's right. 4 warriors are better than 3. 5, Sabine corrected. I'm not missing this. 6, Ezra added, rubbing his throat. Someone's got to keep you all from dying heroically. Jin felt something unfamiliar warm his chest. Not the cold certainty of the ghost, but something closer to what he'd felt with his companions on Tsushima. Trust. Brotherhood forged not by blood but by shared struggle. Then we go to face impossible odds, Jin said quietly. Together, as warriors should. Sabine set coordinates, and the shuttle jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind the devastation of Phoenix Squadron's worst defeat, carrying with it a samurai, a Jedi, a Mandalorian, and a boy, all united by the simple but profound choice to stand and fight when running would have been wiser. The Empire had scattered the rebellion, isolated its cells, and prepared to eliminate them systematically. But on Selos, a forgotten desert world where three old soldiers waited for death or glory, something unexpected was about to arrive. And the legends being born there would echo across a galaxy that desperately needed heroes, no matter how unlikely their origins. Selos was a world of endless desert, its surface scoured by relentless winds that carved canyons from ancient rock and buried the past beneath dunes of rust-colored sand. The shuttle descended through atmosphere thick with dust, instruments barely penetrating the perpetual storm that shrouded the planet. "I'm reading a single structure," Sabine reported, guiding them toward coordinates Ahsoka had provided. "Modified ATTE Walker, converted for habitation. That's where the clones are holed up." Through the viewport, Jin saw it, a massive six-legged war machine resting in a canyon. Weapon systems still functional despite obvious age. Republic insignia faded but visible on its scarred hull. Smoke rose from exhaust vents, evidence of life inside. The shuttle landed 50 meters from the walker. Sand whipped across the hull as they disembarked, forcing Jin to shield his eyes against the stinging particles. The environment reminded him of stories he'd heard about the Gobi Desert. Hostile, unforgiving, designed to break the unprepared. A hatch opened on the walker's side. Three figures emerged, weapons ready, blaster rifles trained on the newcomers with professional precision. They wore mismatched armor, pieces of clone trooper gear mixed with civilian clothing adapted for desert survival. But their bearing was unmistakable. Soldiers, aged but unbroken. The lead figure lowered his rifle first. Eyes. The same eyes, Jin realized, as if all three were brothers, studying the group with tactical assessment. "Kanan Jarrus, didn't expect to see you out here. Thought you were running with that Twi'leks crew." "Captain Rex," Kanan replied, relief evident. "We are. This is part of Hera's crew. Sabine, Ezra, and this is Jin Sakai. It's complicated." Rex's gaze fixed on Jin, specifically on his katana. "That's not standard issue, not even close. What army you serve with, soldier?" "None that exist in your records," Jin replied simply. "I am samurai, from a land called Tsushima. The Force brought me to this galaxy, and I fight now with the rebellion against the Empire." The other two clones exchanged glances. One, with distinctive facial hair and a more relaxed posture, chuckled. "Samurai, from another galaxy. Sure, why not? We've seen weirder things. I'm Gregor. The quiet one is Wolf." Wolf, who wore a cybernetic eye replacement, grunted acknowledgement but kept his rifle ready. "You're here because the Empire's coming, aren't you? We picked up increased chatter on Imperial frequencies. Sounded like they're mobilizing for something big." "Phoenix Squadron was attacked," Kanan explained grimly. "Scattered. The Empire is hitting rebel cells across multiple sectors. We think you're on their target list." "Finally," Gregor said with inappropriate cheer. "Was getting bored hunting Yupa out here. A proper battle sounds refreshing." "Against an Imperial task force?" Wolf countered. "That's not a battle. It's a massacre. We should evacuate. Live to fight another day." "Can't," Rex said flatly. "We sent our shuttle for supplies 3 days ago. Won't be back for another week. We're stuck here with whatever we've got." He gestured to the walker. "One ATTE, functional weapons, limited ammunition, against whatever the Empire sends." Jin studied the terrain, the canyon providing natural barriers on 3 sides, open desert to the north offering clear firing lines but also the most likely approach vector. Defensive position with advantages and vulnerabilities in equal measure. "How many can this walker withstand?" Jin asked. "Depends what they send," Rex replied. "Against standard infantry and light armor? We could hold off a battalion against AT-ATs or sustained air support? He shook his head. We'd last maybe an hour. Then we ensure they send only what we can defeat, Jin said. We control the engagement, force them to fight on our terms. Wolf's cybernetic eye focused on Jin with predatory intensity. You sound like you've done this before, held impossible positions. On Tsushima, I defended castles with handfuls of warriors against armies. I learned the terrain, psychology, and will matter more than numbers. Jin pointed to the canyon's narrowest point. There, we create a kill zone, funnel their forces, deny them maneuverability, make them pay for every meter of ground. Rex studied the terrain with new appreciation. Classic defensive strategy, but we'd need to convince them to approach from that direction, not just bombard us from distance. We make them want to capture, not kill, Kanan suggested. The Empire wants prisoners, information about rebel cells, Phoenix Squadron's location. If they think we're fortified but not unbreachable, they'll commit ground forces instead of orbital bombardment. Sabine grinned. I can make this place look more fortified than it is. Paint some fake gun emplacements, rig sensor decoys, make them think we've got 3 times the firepower we actually have. Deception, Gregor said approvingly. I like it. Very clone-like thinking. We were engineered to be tactically flexible, but most of us preferred honest fighting. This is the kind of creative thinking that wins battles. They spent the next 6 hours preparing. Rex showed them the ATTE's interior, cramped but functional, with enough supplies for a prolonged siege if rationed. The Walker's main cannon could penetrate heavy armor at range. Its mass driver side cannons were effective against infantry and light vehicles, but ammunition was limited, maybe 50 shots total. Jin worked with Sabine to position false gun emplacements, damaged equipment arranged to look functional from distance. They scattered debris to suggest a larger defensive force. Jin contributed techniques from Tsushima, sight lines designed to make observers overestimate defender numbers, psychological markers that suggested greater preparation than existed. Wolf monitored Imperial communications, his cybernetic enhancements allowing him to parse multiple channels simultaneously. They're coming, he finally announced. 2 Imperial troop transports, 4 ATST walkers, full company of stormtroopers. ETA 4 hours. They're landing at the northern approach, exactly where we wanted them. Any mention of orbital support? Kanan asked. Negative. Orders specify capture if possible. They want prisoners. Wolf's expression was grim, which means they're confident they can take us with ground forces alone. Arrogance is a weakness, Jin observed. The Mongols learned that lesson on Tsushima, so will the Empire. As the sun set, both of them, painting the desert in shades of crimson and gold that reminded Jin painfully of home, the defenders gathered in the ATTE's main compartment. 6 warriors against more than 100 Imperial soldiers and 4 armored walkers. On Tsushima, Jin had faced similar odds and survived through cunning, fear, and the ghost's ruthless pragmatism. But he'd fought alone then, carrying the burden of necessary evil in isolation. Here he had companions, soldiers who understood warfare's costs, who'd made hard choices and lived with consequences. I want to understand something, Wolf said, breaking the pre-battle silence. His organic eye studied Jin with the same intensity as his cybernetic one. You say you're samurai, that you fought an invasion of your homeland, but you also call yourself the Ghost. Those seem like contradictions. Jin was quiet for a moment, then unsheathed his katana, laying it across his knees. Samurai follow Bushido, the way of the warrior. Honor, loyalty, facing death without fear. I was raised to embody these ideals, to fight openly, to die gloriously if necessary. Sounds like Jedi philosophy, Ezra observed. Rigid codes that don't always account for reality. Yes, Jin agreed. When the Mongols invaded, I fought as samurai, and we were slaughtered. My clan, my friends, everyone who stood honorably against an enemy that cared nothing for honor. So I changed. I learned to fight from shadows, to use poison and fear, to become the Ghost, a legend that haunted the invaders, that made them see death in every shadow. You became what you had to become, Rex said. It wasn't a question. To protect your people. I became something my uncle said was worse than the enemy, something that dishonored everything my family stood for. Jin met Rex's eyes, but I saved Tsushima. The price was my soul, but my people lived. That is the ghost bargain. Victory through any means, bearing the weight so others don't have to. Gregor leaned forward. And now, here, in this galaxy, are you samurai or ghost? Jin thought of the depot on Gorel, the soldiers he'd left in the inferno, of the bounty hunter he'd spared, of choosing to come to Selos, to stand with strangers against impossible odds. I am learning, he said finally, that perhaps the choice is not either or. Perhaps there is a path between honor and pragmatism, between the warrior I was raised to be and the weapon I became. Perhaps the ghost can fight for something beyond survival, can fight for hope. Kanan placed a hand on Jin's shoulder. That's what the rebellion is. People who chose to fight when surrender was easier, who became what they needed to be to resist tyranny. Some of us broke codes we were raised to honor. He glanced at Rex. Some of us were designed to be weapons and chose to be more. But we're all here in this desert because we believe some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds say we'll lose. Especially when the odds say we'll lose, Sabine added. That's when it matters most. Wolf checked his equipment with practiced efficiency. Philosophical debates are fine, but we've got incoming hostiles in 3 hours. We need a battle plan that accounts for reality. They outnumber us 20-1, outgun us significantly, and have armored support. How do we not die? We make them afraid, Jin said simply. Not of our firepower. They know we're limited. We make them afraid of shadows of the unknown, of legends that shouldn't exist. The Empire trains soldiers to fight rebels with guns and ships. They don't train them to fight ghosts. Rex's weathered face creased in a smile that held no humor, only grim understanding. Psychological warfare. Break their morale before breaking their bodies. I like it. We've got the numbers disadvantage but the experience advantage. Every clone here has survived battles that would have destroyed lesser soldiers. We know how to make an enemy hesitate, and hesitation in combat is fatal. They refined the plan through the night. The ATTE would hold the canyon's center, providing fire support. Rex would man the main cannon, his gunnery skills legendary even among clones. Gregor and Wolf would take the side guns, covering flanks. Kanan and Ezra would deploy to the canyon walls with Sabine, using mobility and surprise to harass from elevation. And Jin would become the ghost. He would move through the battlefield like wind through reeds, appearing where unexpected, striking from impossible angles, creating the impression of multiple attackers. Psychological multiplication, making the enemy see threats that didn't exist. Fear shadows that held only one warrior. As the first sun rose, painting the desert gold, Wolf's sensors detected the Imperial force approaching. Here they come. 2 clicks out and closing. They're being cautious. Scouts forward, main force holding back. They suspect a trap, Rex observed. Good. Cautious enemies make mistakes. Overconfident ones are harder to manipulate, but fearful ones second-guess themselves. Jin donned his ghost armor, the black and gray leather he'd worn for countless raids on Tsushima, now scarred by battles across multiple worlds. He checked his blades, said a silent prayer to ancestors who might not hear across dimensional barriers, and embraced the cold clarity that came before combat. The ghost is ready, he said. Sabine handed him a communication device. This time, keep it on. We need to coordinate, and you dying because you went silent would be really inconvenient. Jin accepted it, tucking it into his armor. I will not be silent. I will be everywhere. The Imperial force entered the canyon, exactly as predicted. 4 AT-ST walkers led, their weapons sweeping for targets. Behind them, troop transports disgorged stormtroopers who advanced in disciplined formation, using the walkers as mobile cover. And at the rear, surveying the battlefield from a command speeder, Jin saw a figure in gray uniform with a distinctive bearing, an Imperial officer who radiated the same wrongness as the Inquisitors, though less intensely. Someone touched by the dark side, perhaps, or simply someone who served it willingly enough to be tainted. Imperial officer, rear position, Jin reported quietly. Command element. If we eliminate him, their coordination fails. That's deep in their formation, Wolf observed. You'd have to fight through 100 soldiers. The ghost does not fight through, Jin replied. The ghost flows around. He slipped from the ATTE, vanished into shadows that shouldn't have existed in the rising sunlight, and became what the Empire feared most, an enemy that couldn't be quantified, couldn't be detected by sensors, couldn't be stopped by overwhelming force. The hunt had begun, and in the desert canyon of CLOs, legends would be written in blood, steel, and the desperate courage of warriors who refused to yield. The first walker exploded before the Imperial force understood they were under attack. Rex's cannon shot, perfectly aimed at the ATST's vulnerable neck joint, severed the head from the body. The walker collapsed in a screaming death of metal, crushing two stormtroopers beneath its wreckage. Chaos erupted. The remaining three walkers scattered, seeking cover while their commanders tried to locate the source of fire. The ATE was obvious, but its camouflaged position in the canyon's rock face made it a difficult target. The Imperial commander, the officer Jin had marked, was shouting orders, directing walkers to suppress the position while infantry advanced. Jin moved through the confusion like a shadow at noon. He'd positioned himself along the canyon's eastern wall, where wind-carved overhangs created blind spots in the Imperial line of sight. Now he descended, using rope and rock face, reaching ground level behind the advancing infantry. 30 stormtroopers focused forward on the ATTE, unaware that death approached from behind. His katana whispered from its sheath. The first trooper fell without sound, Jin's blade finding the armor gap at the neck. Quick, clean, fatal. The second turned at his companion's collapse, saw the ghost too late. Jin's tanto took him in the chest, piercing the armor's weak point with the precision of 10,000 practice strikes. "Contact rear!" someone shouted. Blasters swiveled, but Jin was already moving, using the confused troopers as cover against their own companions. Bolts flew wild, hitting friendlies more than the target. Jin wove between them, blade dancing, each strike deliberate and lethal. He'd promised Kanan to minimize casualties. That promise died the moment the Imperials opened fire on his position. War had rules, but survival had priorities. "It's him!" a trooper screamed. "The Black Ghost! He's here!" Fear rippled through the Imperial ranks like poison through water. Jin felt it, used it, became it. He threw smoke bombs, Sabine's creation, enhanced to produce choking clouds that sensors couldn't penetrate. In the artificial darkness, he was invisible, striking from impossible angles, the katana's steel singing its death song. Above, Kanan and Ezra engaged from the canyon walls. Blue lightsaber flashes marked their positions as they deflected blaster fire, force-pushing stormtroopers from cliff edges. Sabine's pistols cracked with precision, each shot finding targets that threatened the Jedi. The ATTE's side cannons roared, Gregor and Wolf targeting the remaining walkers with devastating accuracy. Another ATST fell, its leg joints shattered, the pilot trapped inside screaming as the vehicle toppled. But the Imperial force wasn't breaking. Their training held despite casualties, despite fear. They adapted, forming defensive squares, covering each other's blind spots. The command officer, Jin could see him now through gaps in the smoke, was rallying them with sharp orders and the kind of presence that turned frightened men into effective soldiers. Jin needed to eliminate that officer, break the command structure, and the Imperial response would fragment. He moved through the battlefield, using destroyed walkers and fallen troopers as cover. Blaster bolts scorched the air around him, close enough to feel their heat. His armor took a glancing hit, the impact bruising ribs already damaged from the Inquisitor fight, but the treated leather held. Not Beskar, but effective enough against poor aim and deflected shots. A stormtrooper spotted him, tracking with his rifle. Jin couldn't dodge in time. The bolt would hit center mass. Kanan's lightsaber intercepted it, the Jedi having force leaped from the canyon wall to Jin's position. "Told you to keep comms on. I can't cover you if I don't know where you are." "Apologies," Jin said, then pointed. "The officer, command element. Without him, they're still dangerous but uncoordinated." "I know." Kanan deflected 3 more bolts in rapid succession. "Go! I'll cover your approach. Ezra, Sabine, suppressing fire on that command speeder." Jin ran. Not the steady, controlled approach of samurai in formal combat, but the ghost sprint, desperate, committed, accepting death as possible, but victory as necessary. Stormtroopers tried to intercept, but Kanan was there, lightsaber creating a shield of blue light that nothing penetrated. Sabine's shots forced the officer to take cover behind his speeder. The man was older than Jin expected, with the weathered face of career military. Not a fanatic or a coward, but a professional doing his duty. In another life, they might have respected each other. In this life, one of them had to die. Jin closed the final distance, leaped over the speeder's hood, and brought his katana down in a perfect overhead strike. The officer drew a vibroblade, faster than Jin anticipated, and caught the blow. Steel met energized metal with a shriek that cut through the battle's chaos. "Impressive blade," the officer said calmly, pushing Jin back with surprising strength. "Cortosis weave, perhaps? Or something else? The Emperor would pay handsomely for such technology." "My blade is not for sale," Jin replied, circling. "Nor am I. Surrender. Order your troops to withdraw. This battle is lost." The officer laughed, genuine amusement despite their circumstances. "Lost? Boy, I've fought in wars across the galaxy. This is barely a skirmish. You've destroyed 2 walkers and killed maybe 20 soldiers. I've got 60 more, 2 functional walkers, and orbital support if I need it. You're the ones who should surrender." "Then why haven't you called for orbital bombardment?" Jin asked, already knowing the answer. "Because you're more valuable alive. The Black Ghost, the samurai from nowhere, the legend that's inspiring resistance across multiple sectors. If I bring you in alive, the Emperor himself will take notice." The officer's eyes gleamed. "I'm offering you the same deal. Surrender, and I'll spare your companions. Fight, and everyone dies. Your choice." Jin thought of his uncle making similar offers on Tsushima, promising mercy if Jin abandoned the ghost path. He'd refused then, fought through to bitter victory. But this wasn't Tsushima. These weren't his people. He'd known these rebels for weeks, not years. The pragmatic choice was to surrender, to save lives. The ghost would have accepted. The samurai would have refused. Jin Sakai, who was becoming something between both, made a different choice. "I offer you the same," Jin said quietly. "Withdraw. Tell the Empire that Selos is defended by warriors who will not yield. Save your soldiers' lives. Or stay and learn why legends survive where armies fall." The officer's expression hardened. "So be it." He triggered something on his wrist, a communicator. "All units, kill order, no prisoners, and bring the walkers to my position. I want this canyon leveled." The 2 remaining ATSTs turned, their weapons tracking toward the command speeder where Jin and the officer dueled. But they weren't targeting Jin. They were aiming at the ATTE, preparing to overwhelm Rex's position with concentrated fire. Jin made his decision in the heartbeat before the walkers could fire. He threw his tanto, not at the officer but at the command speeder's control panel. The blade struck true, piercing through to the power cell beneath. The speeder exploded in a fireball that consumed the officer and threw Jin backward, his armor smoking, pain lancing through his body. Through blurred vision, he saw the walkers hesitate, their commanders confused by the sudden loss of the command element. That moment of hesitation was enough. The ATTE's cannon spoke again. Rex's shot precisely calculated to strike the nearest walker's cockpit. The vehicle exploded. The final walker attempted to retreat, but Gregor's shot crippled its legs. It crashed onto its side, weapon systems offline. But the Imperial infantry wasn't defeated. 60 stormtroopers, now leaderless but enraged by casualties, advanced on the ATTE with the desperate fury of soldiers who knew defeat meant death or disgrace. They poured fire onto the walker's position, energy bolts overwhelming its shields. "Shields failing," Gregor's voice crackled over the comms. "We've got maybe 30 seconds before they breach the hull." Jin forced himself upright, ignoring the fire in his lungs, the blood in his mouth. His katana was still in his hand. He couldn't remember if he dropped it or held on through the explosion. Muscle memory, perhaps, or simply refusing to release his father's blade even in extremis. He looked at the advancing Imperial force, at the overwhelming numbers, at the certain defeat approaching. On Tsushima, he'd faced similar moments and survived through cunning and ruthlessness. Here he had something else. companions who fought beside him, who trusted his plan, who deserved better than dying in this forgotten desert. Jin reached deep inside himself, to the place where he found the stillness his father taught, where meditation met combat, where the samurai and the ghost became one unified warrior. He felt something respond, not the force as Kanan described it, but something adjacent, the discipline of a lifetime channeled into a single moment of impossible clarity. His next movements were instinct transcended into art. Jin ran toward the Imperial force, not away. His katana became an extension of will rather than weapon. He moved between blaster bolts as if choreographed, each sidestep perfectly timed, each deflection of his blade sending energy bolts back toward their source. Stormtroopers fell, struck by their own reflected shots, unable to track a target that moved with inhuman precision. Is he? Ezra's voice over the comm, awed. Is he using the Force? I feel something, but it's different. Not the Force, Kanan replied, wonder in his tone. Something else. Something I've only read about in the oldest Jedi texts. A warrior's discipline so complete that it touches the fabric of reality without channeling it. Moving meditation. Combat as enlightenment. Jin didn't hear them. He was beyond hearing, beyond thought, beyond self. There was only the blade, the enemy, and the eternal moment of action. 20 stormtroopers fell in the span of a minute, cut down by a warrior who had transcended human limitation through sheer will and perfect technique. The remaining Imperial forces broke. It wasn't a retreat, it was a rout. Soldiers who'd been professional and disciplined moments before now scrambled for their transports, abandoning wounded comrades, desperate to escape the legend that had materialized among them. The Black Ghost, who fought like a demon and moved like a phantom, who couldn't be killed because death itself feared his blade. Jin pursued them to the canyon's edge, then stopped. Enough. He'd made the point, broken their will. Slaughtering fleeing soldiers served no purpose beyond vengeance, and vengeance was a poor foundation for liberation. He let them run. The Imperial transports lifted off, overcrowded with survivors, leaving behind destroyed walkers, dozens of bodies, and the wreckage of Imperial confidence. They'd come with overwhelming force to capture or kill 3 old clones, and had been devastated by 6 warriors who refused to accept impossible odds. Jin walked back through the battlefield, his earlier clarity fading, replaced by exhaustion and pain. Every step hurt. His armor was scorched, his body bruised and bleeding from a dozen minor wounds. But he walked upright, katana still in hand, because warriors did not show weakness until victory was secured. Rex emerged from the ATTE, followed by Gregor, Wolf, and the others. The clone captain studied the devastation with the expression of someone who'd seen every type of battle and was still capable of being impressed. That was... Rex started, then stopped. I don't have words for what that was. I've fought beside Jedi, served with the best soldiers the galaxy ever produced. But what you just did, how you moved, how you fought, that was something else entirely. Desperation, Jin replied quietly, an acceptance that death was preferable to surrender. More than that, Kanan said. He approached Jin carefully, lightsaber deactivated, studying the samurai with new understanding. You touched something out there. Not the Force. You're not Force-sensitive in the traditional sense. But you access something parallel to it through pure discipline and will. The ancient Jedi called it Teras Kasi, the way of the steel hand. Combat as spiritual practice, the body as a vessel for something greater than self. Jin thought of his father's teachings, of samurai philosophy that spoke of the sword as the soul. Perhaps different cultures across impossible distances discovered similar truths about warriors and the nature of perfected skill. Whatever I touched, Jin said, it was not enough to prevent this. He gestured at the bodies scattered across the canyon. Imperial soldiers, conscripts most likely, dead because they followed orders. There is no honor in this victory. No, Wolf agreed, his cybernetic eye gleaming. But there's survival. And survival means we can fight another day, save more people, resist the Empire's advance. War isn't about honor. It's about making hard choices and living with them. The ghost's lesson, Jin murmured. I learned it on Tsushima. I hope this galaxy might teach me something different. Sabine approached, checking Jin's injuries with practiced efficiency. It did teach you something different. On Tsushima, you fought alone. Here, you fought with us. That's not nothing. Before Jin could respond, their communication devices crackled to life. Hera's voice, strained but controlled. Ghost crew, respond. We've successfully reinforced Ryloth's resistance, but Phoenix Squadron is scattered. Commander Sato is organizing a full withdrawal to the secret base. All cells are being recalled. What's your status? Kanan activated his comm. Selos is secure. Captain Rex and his squad are intact. We took heavy Imperial casualties. They won't be back soon. Good. The Empire is spreading itself thin, trying to hit all rebel positions simultaneously. They expected us to collapse under coordinated assault, but the cells are holding. Hera paused. There's something else. Our intelligence reports that someone, the reports aren't clear who, single-handedly held Selos against a full Imperial company. The surviving soldiers are spreading stories about a ghost warrior who couldn't be killed, who moved like smoke and struck like lightning. Jin's reputation just went galactic. Jin closed his eyes, feeling the weight of another legend being born. On Tsushima, the ghost had been a tool, a necessary evil. Here it was becoming something else, a symbol that transcended one man, inspiring resistance across worlds he'd never visited. The black ghost of Selos, Gregor said with a grin, has a nice ring to it. You're officially legendary, Jin. Songs will be written. Probably terrible ones, but still. Legends die, Jin replied. Warriors endure. I would rather be the latter. Too late, Rex said. You're both now. The question is what you do with it. Legends can inspire or intimidate. You've proven you can do both. The rebellion needs that. We need symbols that make people believe resistance isn't suicide. Jin looked at his katana, the blade his father gave him, carried across impossible distances, stained with blood from 2 galaxies. He thought of his uncle's words. You are no longer samurai, and Kanan's. You're not what you were, but you're not lost either. You're becoming something new. Perhaps that was the truth. Not samurai bound by ancient codes, not the ghost consumed by necessary evil, but something forged in the space between. A warrior who understood honor but accepted pragmatism, who fought for ideals while recognizing reality, who could inspire hope without ignoring cost. Then I will be the legend this rebellion needs, Jin said finally. But I will not pretend it comes without price. Every soldier who fell today, Imperial or Rebel, is a price paid. I will remember them. That's the difference between you and the Empire, Kanan said quietly. They forget they're dead. Treat soldiers as disposable. You carry them with you. That weight is what keeps us human. The communication crackled again, Ahsoka's voice this time. All units converge on coordinates I'm transmitting. Phoenix Squadron is regrouping, but we need to discuss something critical. The Empire's response to today's battles was too coordinated, too precise. Someone high up is orchestrating this campaign, and they know more about us than they should. Another Inquisitor? Ezra asked. Worse, Ahsoka replied. This has Grand Admiral Thrawn's signature all over it. Strategic brilliance, psychological warfare, turning our strengths into weaknesses. If he's targeting this sector, we're in more danger than any of us realized. Jin didn't know who Thrawn was, but he heard the fear in Ahsoka's voice. A Jedi who'd survived the Empire's worst, now genuinely frightened of a single opponent. Then we learned, Jin said. As I learned to fight the Mongol generals, we learned to fight this Thrawn. No enemy is invincible. All have weaknesses. Rex clapped Jin's shoulder, a warrior's acknowledgement. Spoken like someone who's toppled empires before. All right, Ghost of Selos, let's see if you can help us topple another one. They prepared for extraction, loading the ATTE with salvaged weapons and equipment. As they worked, Jin noticed Ezra approaching hesitantly. Can I ask you something? The boy said. That thing you did, the way you moved during the final push. Kanan said it was like touching the Force but different. Can you teach me that? Jin considered the question. On Tsushima, he'd trained young samurai in his clan's techniques. Here he could share the discipline his father taught, not mystical power, but the perfection of skill through endless practice. The path I walk requires lifetimes to master, Jin said honestly. But I can teach you the beginning. Discipline of mind, control of body, the meditation that becomes action. It will not make you invincible, nothing can, but it may help you survive when the force is not enough. Ezra smiled. That's all I'm asking for, to survive long enough to make a difference. Then we train, Jin agreed. But know this, the path is hard. It requires sacrifice, discipline beyond what most will accept. And even mastered completely, it offers no guarantee of victory. Only the chance to fight on your own terms. Coming from the guy who just fought off 100 Imperials, Ezra replied, I'll take those odds. The sun set over Selos as Hera arrived with the Ghost, the familiar ship descending through dust storms to collect the warriors. Jin took one last look at the battlefield, at the price of their survival carved in blood and metal across the desert canyon. On Tsushima, he'd paid similar prices and wondered if his soul could ever be reclaimed. Here, surrounded by companions who understood the cost, who chose to fight despite it, perhaps redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but learning to carry it forward with purpose. The Black Ghost had survived Selos, but more importantly, Jin Sakai had survived, still capable of feeling the weight of his choices, still determined to make those choices matter. And in a galaxy desperate for heroes, that might be the most important victory of all. The Phoenix Squadron's secret base was hidden within a massive asteroid field in an unnamed system, a labyrinth of rock and ice where sensor interference made detection nearly impossible. Inside the largest asteroid, carved chambers housed the remnants of the rebellion's local forces. 3 frigates, a handful of fighters, and perhaps 200 operatives who'd survived the Empire's coordinated assault. Jin stood in the command center, studying holographic displays that showed the tactical situation across multiple sectors. Red markers indicated Imperial victories, rebel cells destroyed or scattered. Blue markers showed successful defenses or evacuations. The map was predominantly red. We lost 40% of our operational capacity in a single coordinated strike, Commander Sada was explaining to the assembled leadership. 17 cells eliminated, 12 more compromised and forced to relocate. Our supply lines are disrupted, our safe houses exposed. This wasn't random. Someone planned this with surgical precision. Ahsoka stood at the center of the room, her white lightsabers holstered, but her presence commanding attention. Grand Admiral Thrawn, I've encountered his work before, during the Clone Wars, when he was still rising through the Chiss hierarchy. He's not like other Imperial commanders. He doesn't rely on overwhelming force or fear. He studies his enemies, learns their culture, their psychology, their art. Then he dismantles them from within. Art? Sabine asked, confused. What does art have to do with military strategy? Everything, to Thrawn. He believes that understanding a people's art reveals their fundamental nature, their hopes, fears, tactical thinking. He's probably studying every piece of rebel propaganda, every symbol we use, looking for patterns. Ahsoka's gaze fell on Jin. Which means he's already heard about you, the Black Ghost, the warrior from nowhere who defeats Imperial forces with primitive weapons and impossible skill. You're an anomaly he can't categorize, and that makes you either very dangerous to us or very valuable. Jin had faced strategic opponents on Tsushima, Mongol generals who adapted to his ghost tactics, who learned to counter his methods. If he studies enemies through their culture, then we must become culturally unpredictable, change our patterns, abandon symbols he's learned, evolve faster than he can analyze. Easier said than done, Wolf observed. The clone had chosen to join the rebellion formally after Selos, along with Rex and Gregor. Thrawn has the Empire's resources. We're scattered, depleted, barely holding together. He can afford to be patient. Then we force him to be impatient, Kanan suggested. Hit targets he can't ignore. Threaten assets he needs to protect. Make him react instead of planning. That's a dangerous game, Rex warned. Forcing a strategic genius into reactive mode doesn't neutralize his intelligence. It just makes him adapt faster. I've seen commanders like this before. They thrive on chaos, turning enemy aggression into opportunities. Jin thought of the Khan's generals, how they'd evolved their tactics when the Ghost became predictable. Then we become what he cannot predict. Not rebels following patterns, but individuals making unpredictable choices. The ghost succeeded on Tsushima because I fought without formal tactics. Improvisation, opportunism, adapting to each moment. You fought alone, Ahsoka pointed out. A rebellion can't function that way. We need coordination, communication, trust. Those things create patterns. Patterns Thrawn will exploit. Unless, Hera interjected, a thoughtful expression on her face, we split our operations. Multiple independent cells, each pursuing different objectives with different methods. No centralized command for Thrawn to predict. No singular strategy to counter. Sato shook his head. That's essentially what we have now, and it's failing. Divided, we're vulnerable to being eliminated piecemeal. Not divided, Jin said, understanding Hera's thinking. Diverse. Each cell led by someone who thinks differently, fights differently. This Thrawn studies patterns. Give him too many patterns to analyze simultaneously. Overwhelm his strategic calculations with sheer variation. A new voice entered the conversation. Cold, mechanical, emanating from a hooded figure who'd been silent in the shadows until now. An interesting theory, but you assume Thrawn thinks like you. He doesn't. Everyone turned. The figure stepped forward, revealing robes marked with symbols Jin didn't recognize. The voice continued, mechanically distorted. I am Senator Gall Travis. I've studied Thrawn extensively through Imperial channels before my defection. He doesn't just analyze patterns, he predicts them. Your diversification strategy would actually help him, giving him multiple data streams to synthesize into a unified understanding of rebel psychology. Then what do you suggest? Cannon asked, tension in his voice. Something he cannot predict because it comes from outside his frame of reference entirely. Travis turned to Jin. You, the samurai from a dimension the Empire's databases don't contain. Your tactical thinking, your cultural framework, your fighting style, none of it exists in any military history Thrawn can access. You're invisible to his analysis. Jin felt the weight of expectations settling on his shoulders. Familiar, heavy, like the first time his clan looked to him for salvation against the Mongols. You want me to lead operations against Thrawn? Not lead, Ahsoka corrected. Inspire. You've already become a symbol, the black ghost who appears impossibly, who defeats superior forces through means the Empire can't counter. Thrawn will try to analyze you, but every assumption he makes will be wrong because your foundation is alien to this galaxy. That's putting a lot of faith in one warrior, Gregor observed. What happens when Thrawn figures him out? Everyone can be analyzed eventually. Then Jin evolves before he can, Sabine said. That's what he did on Tsushima, right? When the Mongols adapted to the ghost, you changed tactics again. Constant evolution. Jin thought of those desperate months, always staying one step ahead of enemies who learned from each encounter. It had been exhausting, isolating, had cost him pieces of himself he'd never recovered. That path nearly destroyed me. I survived, but I became something my own people feared. I am hesitant to walk it again. Kanan placed a hand on Jin's shoulder. This time you won't walk it alone. Whatever operations you run, we run them with you. The ghost doesn't operate in isolation here. He operates as part of a crew, a family. That changes everything. Jin looked around the command center, at faces he'd come to know over weeks that felt like lifetimes. Hera, who'd first offered him alliance. Sabine, who'd enhanced his weapons for this new war. Ezra, who wanted to learn the warrior's path. Kanan, who understood the cost of breaking codes to survive. Rex, Gregor, and Wolf, soldiers who'd fought longer wars than Jin could imagine. Ahsoka, a warrior who'd walked away from her order to find her own path. They weren't asking him to become the ghost again. They were asking him to be himself, samurai and ghost. Honor and pragmatism, individual and comrade, in service of something larger than survival. There is a Mongol fortress on Tsushima, Jin said quietly, that I studied for weeks before attacking. The Khan's generals believed it impregnable. High walls, vast garrison, strategic position. I took it in a single night with 17 warriors by doing what they considered impossible. Entering through the main gate during a feast, when guards were drunk and leadership distracted. Audacity, Rex said appreciatively. I like it. What's the imperial equivalent? Jin turned to the holographic display, studying the red markers indicating Imperial victories. These strikes against rebel cells, they required intelligence. Someone fed Thrawn information about our locations, our operations, our leadership. How? We've been investigating that, Ahsoka said grimly. There's a leak somewhere in our network. A traitor, or more likely someone compromised through torture or bribery. We haven't identified them yet. Then we use that leak, Jin suggested. Feed false information through channels Thrawn is monitoring. Make him believe we're planning one operation while executing another. The Mongols called it the emptiness strategy, appearing weak where you're strong, divided where you're unified. Sun Tzu, Rex murmured, ancient tactical philosophy from old Earth records. All warfare is based on deception. You're saying we let Thrawn think he's winning? We let him think he understands us, Jin corrected. Then we reveal that understanding is incomplete, not by hiding our strength, but by showing him only the aspects we want him to analyze. Hera's eyes lit up. A shell game. He's so busy tracking our obvious movements that he misses the real operation underneath. But what's the real operation? What target matters enough to risk everything on? Jin studied the star map, looking for the equivalent of the Khan's fortress, a target whose fall would shake the Empire's confidence and prove the rebellion wasn't broken. His eyes settled on a system marked in white. Lothal. We returned to where this began, Jin said. Lothal is the sector capital, the world where I first arrived. It has symbolic value, the planet where the Black Ghost was born. But more importantly, it's a logistical hub, Imperial Supply Depot, Training Academy, Garrison Command. Thrawn cannot ignore a direct assault on Lothal. He'll defend it with overwhelming force, Wolf pointed out. We'd be walking into a meat grinder. Unless the assault is deception, Jin replied. We make Thrawn believe we're committing everything to Lothal. Leak plans, move ships visibly, create the impression of desperation. He'll fortify Lothal, pull resources from other sectors to guarantee victory there. And while he's focused on Lothal, Ahsoka asked, though her expression suggested she already understood, we hit his true weakness, not military assets, but political ones. Jin pointed to another system on the map, Coruscant, the Empire's capital world. The Emperor rules through fear and control, but fear requires visibility. If we can strike at the heart of the Empire, prove that even Coruscant isn't safe, we undermine the entire foundation of Imperial authority. Silence filled the command center. The audacity of what Jin proposed was staggering, essentially suggesting they attack the most heavily defended world in the galaxy while using Lothal as a feint. Senator Travis spoke first, mechanical voice tinged with something that might have been respect. It's insane. Thrawn would see through it immediately. He'd never commit fully to defending Lothal if it meant leaving Coruscant vulnerable. Unless he believes the Lothal attack is personal, Sabine said slowly, catching Jin's thinking. The Black Ghost returning to where his legend began. A symbolic strike rather than strategic one. Thrawn analyzes culture. He'd understand symbolic thinking. Might even predict it. He'd see Jin's involvement and assume emotional motivation. Which gives us the opening for the real mission, Kanan finished. While Thrawn's brilliance is occupied predicting and countering a symbolic assault, we go for genuine strategic value. What could we possibly accomplish on Coruscant? Ezra asked. It's not like we can assassinate the Emperor or destroy the Imperial Senate. We don't have those resources. Jin thought of the villages on Tsushima, how liberation wasn't always about killing leaders, but about freeing people to choose their own fate. Not assassination, liberation. Coruscant has political prisoners, rebel leaders, captured Jedi, anyone the Empire considers dangerous. Thrawn's campaign has captured many during these coordinated strikes. If we free them, we restore leadership to scattered cells. Prove the Empire cannot hold its enemies indefinitely. The prison levels on Coruscant are impenetrable, Travis said. Even with perfect intelligence, the security is... Nothing is impenetrable, Jin interrupted quietly. The Mongols believed their fortresses were absolute. I taught them otherwise. The Empire believes its capital is untouchable. We will teach them the same lesson. Rex was studying Jin with an expression of mixed concern and admiration. You understand this is essentially a suicide mission. Even if we succeed in freeing prisoners, escaping Coruscant with Imperial forces converging from every direction, the odds are impossible. Odds are simply numbers, Jin replied. The ghost has defied numbers before, and this time I will not be alone. Damn right you won't be, Hera said firmly. The ghost crew doesn't leave their samurai behind. If we're doing this insane, brilliant, completely reckless thing, we do it together. Ahsoka was quiet for a long moment, her presence in the Force. Jin could feel it now, after Selos, after touching something adjacent to that power. Radiating contemplation. Finally, she spoke. I'll lead the Lothal assault. It needs to look genuine, which means committing real resources and risking real casualties. I can sell that performance to Thrawn. But Jin, understand, if this fails, if Thrawn sees through the deception, both teams will be trapped in kill zones with no support. Then we don't fail, Jin said simply. On Tsushima, failure meant my people died. Here, failure means the same. That has always been sufficient motivation. Sato looked around the command center at the assembled leaders, then nodded slowly. It's the most insane plan I've heard in 30 years of military service, which means it might actually work against someone who expects rational strategy. He activated the holographic display, highlighting both Lothal and Coruscant. We have 2 weeks to prepare. Jin, you'll lead the Coruscant infiltration team. Select who you need. Ahsoka, the Lothal assault is yours. Everyone else, we're spreading the deception. Make Thrawn believe we're desperate, broken, throwing everything at one last symbolic strike. And if he doesn't believe it, Wolf asked. Then we adapt, Rex answered. That's what soldiers do, adapt or die. We've been doing it our entire lives. As the meeting dispersed into smaller planning groups, Jin found himself standing before the holographic display of Coruscant, the planet-spanning city that represented everything the Empire had built. Towers reaching toward space, layers upon layers of civilization, billions of beings living under tyranny's shadow. On Tsushima, he'd freed one island. Here, he was part of something trying to free a galaxy. The scale should have been paralyzing. Instead, Jin felt something he hadn't experienced since leaving his homeworld. Purpose. Not the desperate necessity that had driven the ghost, but genuine calling. These people, these rebels across countless worlds, deserved the same chance his people had. The chance to live without occupation, without fear, without submitting to empires that claimed authority through force alone. Kanan joined him at the display. Having second thoughts? Many thoughts, Jin admitted, but not doubts. This is the path. I see it clearly. The Force showing you the way? Jin shook his head. Something simpler. On Tsushima, my father once told me that a samurai's purpose is to protect those who cannot protect themselves. I failed that purpose many times, broke every code in pursuing it. But here, perhaps I can honor it properly. Not as samurai bound by rigid tradition, not as the ghost consuming himself in darkness, but as something new. A warrior who understands both honor and necessity, Kanan said, who can inspire hope while accepting reality's costs. That's what the rebellion needs. What the galaxy needs. Jin looked at his reflection in the display's surface. A warrior in foreign armor, carrying ancestral blades, planning impossible operations in a galaxy that shouldn't exist. He thought of his uncle's final words. You walk a path I cannot follow. Perhaps his uncle had been right, but perhaps that path, walked far enough, led somewhere worth reaching. 2 weeks, Jin said quietly. Then we strike at the heart of the Empire, and whether we succeed or fail, Thrawn will learn that some warriors cannot be analyzed, some spirits cannot be broken, and some legends become real when people need them most. The Black Ghost rides again, Kanan murmured. May the Force be with us all. And may my ancestors forgive what I'm about to do, Jin added, though I suspect they're beyond caring about the choices of a Ronin in a distant galaxy. But as he said it, Jin felt a warmth, subtle, possibly imagined, but present nonetheless. As if somewhere beyond dimensional barriers, his father was watching, understanding that honor took many forms, and that protecting the innocent was the highest calling regardless of how that protection was achieved. The rebellion had 2 weeks to prepare for the impossible. The Empire had 2 weeks to believe it was invincible. And Jin Sakai, the samurai from a world the galaxy's maps didn't contain, had 2 weeks to prove that legends were more powerful than armies, when those legends fought for something worth dying for. The ghost walked again, and this time, his shadow would reach all the way to the Empire's throne. The assault on Coruscant succeeded in ways no one predicted and failed in ways everyone feared. Jin's team freed 43 prisoners from the Imperial detention levels, including 2 captured Jedi and a dozen rebel cell leaders. Ahsoka's feint at Lothal drew Thrawn's attention exactly as planned, but the Grand Admiral's tactical brilliance meant the diversionary force paid a heavy price in casualties. Both teams escaped, barely, with losses that would haunt their dreams. But the prisoners they freed returned to their cells with renewed hope and strategic intelligence. The Empire's aura of invincibility cracked just slightly, enough for occupied worlds to whisper about resistance. And the legend of the Black Ghost grew from planetary myth to galactic legend, the warrior who struck at Coruscant itself and vanished like smoke. Jin stood weeks later on the Ghost's observation deck, watching hyperspace flow past like the rivers of home. His armor was scarred, his body healing from injuries that would have killed lesser warriors. But he was alive, and more importantly, he'd found something he thought lost forever on Tsushima, a cause worth fighting for that didn't demand he abandon his soul to achieve it. Thinking about home? Sabine asked, joining him. Always, Jin admitted. But home is also here now. With this crew, this fight, perhaps some warriors are meant to travel far from where they began to discover who they truly are. The samurai who became a ghost, who became a legend, Sabine mused. That's quite a journey. Not finished yet, Jin replied. Thrawn is still out there, learning from our victory. The Empire still controls most of the galaxy. The war continues. Yeah, Sabine agreed, but now they know we can hit them anywhere. That legends exist to haunt tyrants, that some warriors refuse to submit no matter the odds. That's worth something. Jin thought of his uncle, of Tsushima, of every battle and betrayal and bitter victory that had forged him into what he'd become. He thought of the companions beside him now. Kanan seeking redemption, Hera fighting for her people, Ezra learning to be brave, Sabine honoring her heritage, Rex and his brothers finding purpose beyond war. They were all ghosts in their own way, survivors of destroyed worlds and fallen orders, carrying weight the galaxy couldn't see but never stopped feeling. Together they'd become something greater than individuals, a crew, a family, a symbol that resistance wasn't futile. On Tsushima, Jin said quietly, I saved my people but lost myself. Here perhaps I can do both. Save others while discovering that redemption isn't about erasing the past but learning to carry it forward with purpose. Deep philosophical stuff, Sabine replied with a grin. Very samurai of you. But for what it's worth, you're not lost, Jin. You're exactly where you need to be. The ghost emerged from hyperspace above another world that needed liberation, another battle that needed fighting, and Jin Sakai, samurai of Tsushima, the black ghost whose legend now spanned galaxies, drew his ancestral blade one more time, ready to stand with companions who'd become family against an empire that would eventually fall. Not because one warrior was invincible, but because freedom's spirit could never be fully extinguished. Some legends died with their warriors, but others lived on, passed from world to world, inspiring generations who'd never meet the heroes they celebrated. Jin had become such a legend, carrying his father's blade and his own hard-earned wisdom into a future no one could predict. The Empire would remember the Black Ghost. Thrawn would study him, analyze him, try to defeat him. Other warriors would try to become him, and the galaxy itself would whisper his name in the shadows, a reminder that tyranny could be resisted, that honor and pragmatism could coexist, and that sometimes the greatest warriors came from the most unexpected places. Jin Sakai had arrived in the Star Wars galaxy by accident. He'd stayed by choice, and he would fight until either the Empire fell or he did, carrying with him the lessons of two worlds, the weight of two legends, in the simple but profound understanding that protecting those who couldn't protect themselves was the highest calling any warrior could answer. The Force had brought him here for a reason. Perhaps this was it, to prove that courage, skill, and determination transcended dimensions, and that even in a galaxy far, far away, the spirit of the samurai could never be conquered.